In this video I go over Ippo's entire life after the anime ended. Some of you guys have probably watched my video on the entire storyline of Hajime no Ippo, where I talk about every character, important fight and arc in great detail. In this video though, the main focus is going to be Ippo himself. The manga has a lot of arcs where even if Ippo isn't technically the main character of that moment, he's still right next to the arc's focus and acts as the plot driver, because in the end of the day the series is called Hajime no Ippo and not Hajime no Name. Here I go through every arc where Ippo is the main focus, break down his fights and explain his perspective even though in arcs centered around other characters. I know this video is probably going to be around the same length as my full storyline video, but you also have to remember, Ippo is the main character and everything revolves around him. Think of this more as the video for people who mainly care about Ippo. But if you want the full journey with every character from start up to where we are now in the manga, you can always check out the other video. Here we are focusing purely on Ippo's life after the anime ended. So if you want to see more of these longer kinds of videos and enjoy them, just leave a like and subscribe to my channel. It would really help me out. The anime left off right before Itadaki's semi-final match for the Rookie Kings tournament. Ippo is training Itadaki in preparation for a semi-final fight with Kumi there to support both boxers. She even asks Ippo if he has free time on the weekend, only for Itadaki's sister to ruin the mood. Itadaki however isn't interested in chit-chat, he's focused solely on his upcoming fight. We learn that while Itadaki has all the talent in the world, his biggest obstacle is a mental one, his self-confidence. He infamously lost to his rival Imai, who looks just like Ippo from Temu, and this has left him doubting his own boxing abilities. He's training hard to regain the confidence, especially since his next opponent is the same boxer he lost to in his first professional fight, Makino Fumito. Makino is known for cheating during his fights, utilizing the flicker jabs. Ippo wants to support Itadaki during the slow point in his confidence, so he cancels the state with Kumi to analyze Makino's match. We then get the humorous scene where Mashiba, like a caveman, demands food from Kumi, who is having none of it and threatens him with violence. After analyzing Makino's match, Ippo and Itadaki run into Makino outside. Makino trash talks Itadaki, reminding him how he beat him by cheating and mocking him for bringing his girlfriend to the fight, only for Imai to correct him that Itadaki's girlfriend is actually his sister. When Ippo tries to defuse the situation, Makino trips him, which fires Itadaki even more, pushing him to train harder. The Kamogawa boys also start betting on who will become this year's Rookie King champion, with Ippo putting his money on Itadaki. In preparation for Makino's flicker jabs, Itadaki seeks to spar with Mashiba, who at the time is the Japanese judo lightweight champion. Mashiba initially refuses, not wanting to associate with an unranked nobody like Itadaki, but Itadaki spills some juicy details about Ippo and Kumi's relationship to provoke Mashiba into sparring with him. We don't see the actual spar, but the aftermath shows Itadaki with a messed up face and Mashiba with a black eye. Despite this, the two become closer, even meeting up outside the gym. Kumi mistakenly thinks Mashiba has finally got a girlfriend and tries to stalk him with Ippo, but it turns out to be Itadaki instead. Mashiba and Itadaki start gossiping about Ippo and Kumi's stagnant relationship, much to Ippo and Kumi's embarrassment. They even discuss how Mashiba's overprotective nature is part of the problem. Eventually, Mashiba acknowledges that Kumi is her own person and needs to make her own decisions. Mashiba also asks why Itadaki is so determined to win the tournament, to which Itadaki responds that he wants to regain his confidence and make Ippo proud by proving he belongs in the professional boxing world. Ippo was called by Yaga and Kamogawa and was informed that he had 1 month to prepare for his title defense against the 7th-ranked boxer Takuzo Karasawa, the previous year's Rookie King champion. Every high-ranked boxer refused to fight Ippo because of his destructive display of power. Ippo wanted to focus on the basics, so he decided to train from scratch for this fight with Karasawa and accepted the challenge. Meanwhile, Takamura informed Kamogawa that he was going on a trip around Japan while waiting for his next fight. This is something Takamura does after each of his world title fights. He goes on a trip for half an arc and returns just in time for the next fight, coinciding with Ippo's and Karasawa's match. At the same time, Sanada, the former Japanese bantamweight champion and the medical student Ippo fought during his first title defense, returned to his old gym to congratulate Karasawa on his upcoming national title fight with Ippo. Karasawa mentioned that he has an anti-Dempsey roll strategy, but the odds are 7-3 that he will lose, so he asked Sanada to help him with his training since Sanada has already experienced Ippo's fists firsthand. fight. In preparation for the fight, Ippo does something similar to Kamogawa's Iron Fist training, where instead of punching logs in the hills, Ippo hammers logs into the hills to train his side muscles. He also trains with Kamogawa using the basic routine we have seen so many times before. Takamura on his trip gets lost, something very relatable as I often get lost myself when wandering around, which results in funny Instagram stories, so it's a win-win situation. Takamura helps a random guy in the countryside pull his car out of an accident, and this countryside happens to be Gerumichi's hometown, Ippo's very first kohai. They don't meet, and this is the last time we see Gerumichi in the story, so for the 3 Gerumichi fans watching this video, this is your moment to embrace him. We also see what Karasawa is up to. He's training his abs to prepare against Ippo's body blows that drain the life out of his opponents. Kamogawa and Ippo analyze Karasawa and conclude that he has very fast hands and is an outboxer, so they plan to target body shots to erase his footwork and make him immobile. Ippo was forbidden by the government to punch logs into the hill, so he had to rely on other training options. He also admits to Itadaki that he has used the Dempsey roll for too long and won't be using it for the time being. We get the random cut to Nekoto where he's robbed by a thief and is chasing after him. The plot twist is that the thief is Takamura, who is just on his way to find a hot spring where a lot of college babes are supposedly waiting for a dreamy tall strong man to appear, only for the dreamy babes to turn out to be monkeys. Takamura picks up a fight with a horde of monkeys and escapes the madness. He then finds himself in Nagoya, where Sawamura randomly spots him on the streets. Then he is in Osaka, where he buys a jar of pickled squid from Senno's granny that will give anyone definite diarrhea. Takamura then calls Ippo from Fukuoka, and just as the squids hit him, he has to take a deep dump in the bushes. Later he enjoys ramen in Okinawa, where Shimabukuro catches him. Basically, Takamura makes a whole Japan tour during this little trip, and nobody at the gym believes him. On the day of the weigh-ins, Ippo and Karasawa check each other's bodies. Ippo expected Karasawa to train his lower body, while Sanada observed that Ippo's back muscles had grown, mistakenly thinking that it was for the Dempsey roll. Sanada confirms that he will be at Karasawa's corner and has his back to defeat Ippo in the match. Meanwhile, Ippo feels a sense of uncertainty, as if something is missing, even though he trained to perfection for the match. Just in time, Takamura returns from a trip and gives Ippo some encouraging words to motivate him. Ippo takes these words to heart and promises Takamura that he will demolish Karasawa. Takamura also offers the squid he took from Senno to Ippo, which thankfully Ippo refuses because something really bad happens later. However, the other Kamogawa boys eat the squid, which later leads to Aoki's downfall. On the day of the fight, the Kamogawa boys are late because they took a deep dump due to the squid, and to make matters even worse, Takamura fingers Aoki to death for loss, causing him to run back to the toilets. When the match begins, Karasawa tries to take the lead, which turns out to be a fatal mistake, as Ippo charges right back at him, confusing Karasawa even further. The psychological pressure causes Karasawa to land fast jabs that have little impact on Ippo. Karasawa tries to outbox as long as he can, but before he knows it, he's cornered and trapped. Ippo capitalizes on this and lands a devastating body shot on Karasawa, who starts panicking. This is not what he prepared for, and he realizes that he underestimated Ippo. With nowhere to escape, Karasawa clinches Ippo to avoid damage, but this turns out to be a grave mistake, as Ippo can easily punch through a clinch into his opponent's stomach. Sanada sees this coming and orders Karasawa to let go, but Ippo jabs him instead. Karasawa has no choice but to block Ippo's heavy punches. Desperate, he throws himself into Ippo, causing both to collapse to the ground, ending the round. By the end of the round, Karasawa is sweating bullets, while Ippo's camp remains cool-headed as always. Karasawa now has to shift his strategy and push Ippo into the ropes. He tries to intimidate Ippo by using his footwork and throwing jabs to lure him in, but the psychological pressure is too great and Karasawa finds himself cornered again. Ippo weaves in and it looks like he's going to use the Dempsey roll. Karasawa prepares to counter, but to his surprise, Ippo goes lower and aims for a body shot. Karasawa grits his teeth, but he's not prepared for Ippo's monstrous strength. On the verge of giving out, Karasawa tries to counter Ippo with his last bit of spirit, but Ippo sees it coming and counters with a devastating blow of his own that scares the crowd. Karasawa dramatically tries to hold onto the ropes, but his spirit can no longer support his broken down body, and he falls to the mat, ending the match with just 2 rounds, with Ippo taking nearly no damage. The next day, Ippo and Itadaki watch Volk's match in America, where he fought the 4th ranked boxer and won easily in the first round. It was revealed that Ippo is ranked 12th in the WBC, but Ippo expressed that he's nowhere near Ricardo's level, recalling how Ricardo knocked him out without any issues during their sparring match just a few hundred chapters ago. While training, Itadaki once again mentioned that he is physically ready but lacks the mental confidence needed to succeed. He sought Ippo's advice on how to overcome this pitiful state, but Ippo admitted he had no clue either since he also struggles with low self-esteem. Kumi appears and wants to support both fighters, which prompts Itadaki to reveal how much Imai irritated him by requesting to meet his sister if he won their match. Ippo and Kumi then share the same fantasy where Ippo would ask to date Kumi if he were to be Mashiba. However, snapping back to reality, Ippo just begins to cry because he can't possibly request something like that. Later, Ippo and Itadaki go into a store and notice that Umezawa's one-shot manga has won an award, so they want to congratulate him. Itadaki and Umezawa discuss Ippo's mentality in fights and conclude that Ippo always enters as a challenger. Meanwhile, Ippo and Umezawa discuss how Itadaki views himself inferior to his opponents when entering his fights. That day, Itadaki experiences an inner crisis, realizing that he lacks so much even before entering the fight: the skills, knowledge, confidence, and most importantly, power. Ippo and Itadaki have a sparring match, though we don't see this full spar. Takamura reveals afterward that Ippo could have knocked Itadaki out if he were serious. Overhearing this, Itadaki demands to know what he truly lacks, and Takamura enlightens him, pointing out that his routine is too predictable, making him vulnerable to being knocked out easily. On the day of the Rookie Kings tournament finals, the Kamogawa boys gave Itadaki their best wishes, with Ippo offering his usual encouragement, telling Itadaki to do his best. This was the day Itadaki had waited for years, a chance to finally prove that he belongs in the ring by defeating his long-lasting rival, who had overshadowed his true potential, and to reclaim his self-confidence. In Itadaki's fight against Imai, Itadaki unlocked his full potential for the first time, but still got his R handed to him. Ippo's only important role here was coming down the ring to cheer Itadaki on until the very end, and Itadaki won the fight by decision, but he was too beaten up to celebrate. Itadaki expressed that his victory was due to Ippo's support and thanked him deeply. Now that Itadaki had won the tournament, he had achieved a national ranking, which gave him the confidence he needed. Sando was in the audience and remarked that the match was nothing special. He was accompanied by his kohai, the West Rookie King champion Hoshi. Hoshi made it clear that he wanted to fight Ippo and issued a challenge. If he could defeat Itadaki in the All Rookie Kings tournament, he would face Ippo for the title. Additionally, Sando revealed that he wanted to fight Ippo again and actually beat him. He even declared if he lost the third time, he would unalive himself. Actually, Ippo decided he no longer wanted to be the Japanese champion anymore. He was eager to relinquish the title to finally face Miyata for the OPBF title and requested a match with Kamogawa. Kamogawa accepted Ippo's offer and promised to request a match as soon as possible. The decision motivated Ippo like never before, and he was eagerly anticipating his match with Miyata. Miyata's camp also accepted the challenge, and the long-awaited match was set. Itadaki, meanwhile, was in the hospital and received visits from Ippo and Ippo from Walmart. It seemed that Imai came to congratulate Itadaki on winning the match, but he was also there because he knew Nanako would be visiting as well. Itadaki also loved staying in the hospital since Kumi would nurse him like a baby, so both of these weirdos enjoyed their time in the hospital. Back at the gym, the Kamogawa boys poked fun at the Gatsu and then "this is a nice pun" from the Itadaki match, but they were quickly scolded for it. Ippo was invited to Kamogawa's office, where it was officially announced that Ippo would fight Miyata for the OPBF title. However, their match was scheduled for 6 months later. To ensure Ippo didn't suffer from ring rust before this major bout, he needed to defend the Japanese title one last time before the OPBF title. Kamogawa noted that the OPBF title fight would be the last fight before heading for the world, so Ippo accepted the challenge and eagerly awaited his next opponent. The next day, Ippo picked up Itadaki from the hospital with a car, and while arriving at the gym, almost ran over Aoki. It's also revealed that Itadaki will not fight in the All Rookie King finals since he is too injured to compete. Initially frustrated, Itadaki accepted the fact that he couldn't participate. Ippo also gives Itadaki the baton to inherit the Japanese title in the near future when he relinquishes it. Ippo's last challenger is set, and it's an old man, a 31-year-old veteran Take. To gather more information about him, Ippo seeks the help of Date, who has become a coach at his own gym. Date mentions that Take was scheduled to face him back when he first won the Japanese title, when Take was ranked first. Date admits that he was quite nervous about facing Take, but Take withdrew before their match began. We learned that the reason Take pulled out was because his son was born and he officially retired from the sport. However, his son became a target of bullying due to a gossip that his father was too afraid and fragile to keep competing. So Take wanted to prove to his son that he still had the fire in him to become a great boxer. His record is 22 wins, 11 losses and 1 draw, as he is too rusty and took him longer to challenge for the title again. Despite this, he has never been KO'd in his career and will stand tall no matter what. Ippo admits that in instead of focusing what's in front of him, he was too fixated on Miyata and realized he shouldn't lose sight of his current challenge. In preparation for this fight, he trained his hooks and stamina to outlast the veteran. By the way, he is 31 years old but looks like the oldest looking dude in the entire manga. On the day of the weigh-ins, Take did his best 2020 cosplay and looked as fragile as he could be. Kamogawa then revealed to Ippo that it was all an act to gain sympathy for the fight. Basically a trick, and it certainly wouldn't be the last one that Take had up on his sleeve. On the day of the fight, Take brought his son with him to witness him become a champion, which, while not outright stated, was another ploy to garner more sympathy from Ippo, who no longer has his father beside him. As soon as the match began, before they even touched gloves, Take said "F that" and immediately started throwing punches. Ippo was caught off guard but quickly got into his rhythm and turned it into a slugfest. Just as Ippo was about to follow up with a hook, Take went down unexpectedly, making Ippo think the fight might already be over. However, it turned out that Take was faking the injury. He quickly charged at Ippo and clung to him, wrapping his arms around him in a clinch. He repeated this about 3 times until Ippo was forced to use his elbows to break free. At this point, Take claimed to know Ippo's weakness, which confused Ippo. If you still haven't guessed, these are all psychological tricks to mess with Ippo's mind and throw him off his game. Ippo charged at Take again, but for some reason he couldn't reach him before the bell rang. In the next round, Ippo tried to punch him again, only to find his fist still couldn't connect. It then dawned on Ippo that Take had switched his stance to a southpaw stance. Ippo hadn't trained to fight against a southpaw and was initially overwhelmed. He decided to block himself while charging right into Take, who responded by charging at Ippo as well, putting one shoulder on him. Ippo tried to land liver blows, but Take deflected them and did something no other boxer had done in the series. From the short distance, he started to throw uppercuts at Ippo repeatedly, leaving Ippo unable to land a hit. By the end of the round, Kamogawa shouted at Ippo to pay close attention to what Take was doing. Ippo took these words to heart and was somewhat able to hit Take through his guard. However, Take got lower and positioned himself again to hit Ippo with more uppercuts. Ippo saw through it, dodged and countered with a light hook, which Take anticipated. Take responded with another uppercut, followed by a flurry of uppercuts again and again. Ippo managed to throw some punches of his own, but they seemed to have little to no impact on Take. In the next round, instead of charging in recklessly, Ippo started to march forward methodically, slowly breaking down Take's defense. But Take again got low into position and took heavy punches that seemed to have no effect, while Ippo received the most damage. Take even managed to cut Ippo's eye, which signaled that things were getting really serious. If Take wanted to, he could exploit this opening and potentially win via referee stoppage. Kamogawa wanted Ippo to hit him, so he did, and Kamogawa revealed that to defeat Take, Ippo should do everything Take does but better. If Take hits hard, Ippo should hit harder. If Take goes low, Ippo should go lower. So when Take went into position again, Ippo pushed him back, went lower himself, and finally saw an opening to send an uppercut of his own. Now, Ippo was the one going low and landing uppercuts on Take. Take abandoned this and opened up his arms, inviting Ippo to slug it out. Even though Take managed to land some decent hits, engaging in a slugfest with Ippo is the worst way to speedrun your life. Things got so bad for Take that Ippo even made his son cry, worried that the stand might not survive the fight. By the end of the round, Ippo thought Take might be unconscious as the man simply refused to go down. We then see that Ippo is right. Take is in a dreamlike state, envisioning his son being disappointed in him. Even the way he stands up from his chair is almost inhuman. Determined to end this before inflicting long-lasting injuries to Take, Ippo throws a devastating punch that sends him flying. But to Ippo's surprise, Take stands back up like a zombie. Ippo unleashed the Dempsey roll and nearly ended the poor man's life with it. However, just before Ippo could land the devastating blow, Take got into his rotation position again and landed a powerful uppercut. At this point, Ippo had enough and delivered the most savage ending combo of the entire series. First, he dodged the uppercut and sent his own counter uppercut to Take, lifting him a full meter off the ground. With Take's son crying out for his father's life, Ippo delivered a career-ending hook, turning out the lights for good and ending the match. Although Take didn't die, it took him a few minutes to get back up from the fight. Afterwards, Take's son asked his father to teach him how to box, which concluded Take's character arc. Kamogawa then informed the press that with this match, Ippo would relinquish the Japanese belt and issue a challenge to Miyata for the OPBF title. Back home, Ippo reflected on Take and even remembered his own dad, learning a lesson he will not forget: to fight for something greater than himself. Ippo wanted to watch Miyata's last OPBF title defense before they faced off, so Aoki organized for Kumi to go with Ippo to the match, which made Ippo nervous since he would be watching the match with his boyfriend together with his girlfriend. They both met up and had a nice chat until Mashiba appeared out of nowhere and ruined the mood. Ippo asked if Mashiba would defend the junior lightweight championship soon, so which Mashiba said he would, but he lacked a challenger since every high-ranked boxer feared him. However, he had one opponent in his mind that he absolutely wanted to crush before heading for the world stage, which Ippo initially assumed was himself. Miyata's match was about to begin, which Mashiba didn't care for and actually hoped for an upset victory by Miyata's opponent, which irritated Ippo. When the match began, Miyata received some fouls, including a headbutt, but he countered and dominated through 2 rounds. During the timeout, Miyata caught a sight of someone familiar in the crowd, Sakaguchi, the manager of the former OPBF champion Arnie Gregory. Next to him was someone menacing, just staring at him. Miyata was too distracted by their presence and lost his rhythm. He mentioned that he recognized this menacing man but couldn't recall where from. He received another headbutt and it started to look like he might actually lose in an upset. This got Miyata out of control. Instead of relying on his usual cool-headed style, he completely abandoned it and just started throwing hands. Did I just say throwing hands? I meant Miyata was beating on his opponent like he's dead meat, even while the guy was on his knees. For good measures, Miyata threw one last devastating punch until the ref stepped in and ended the match. Then we got the insane fight between Takamura vs Mashiba, where both of them were in complete chaos. Ippo watched the match together with Kumi while Mashiba went crazy and almost ended Takamura's life. After the fight, Kumi admitted she may never truly love boxing, and later Sando called Ippo to tell him that Takamura got into a bike crash and would never be able to box again. Takamura obviously didn't die, but the accident forced him to retire and he could no longer compete, that's all. We also learned that Mashiba almost lost his boxing license but instead got a 1-year suspension and could no longer compete in the junior lightweight division. Everyone was upset by this news, except for Kimura, who ruined the mood by celebrating the fact that 2 monsters were no longer in his weight division. Oh man, if he only knew what was coming for him. To get everyone in a better mood, the boys organized a baseball match. Now, I'm not a professional, nor do I know anything about baseball at all, but in short, it goes exactly as you'd expect. Aokimura dominates while Ippo, Itadaki and Takamura suck. They only win thanks to some Deus Ex vampire involvement. Meanwhile, Aoki's cut keeps getting worse and worse. The next day, Ippo and Itadaki went to Osaka to watch one of Hoshi and Sando's matches. Hoshi one-shots his opponent and starts yapping, which gets Sando upset. He orders Aoshi to stay in the locker room until he returns. Sando, of course, absolutely dominates his opponent and then runs into Ippo. They meet up and have a nice chat. Ippo mentions how Sando now exclusively fights Mexican boxers, and Sando explains it's to get used to their style so he can eventually challenge the strongest Mexican boxer, Ricardo Martinez. Sando also says how impressed he is with Hoshi, noting that he couldn't knock Hoshi down even once in their sparring. Itadaki takes note of this since he will fight Hoshi in the near future. Speaking of Hoshi, Sando forgot to take him out of the locker room. Before Sando takes off, he mentions Ippo's obsession with Miyata and says he doesn't think their fight will ever happen, as he believes they aren't destined to meet. This understandably upsets Ippo, who reminds Sando that they promised to fight each other. Sando's reasoning is that he believes that he and Ippo are the ones destined to fight off, so he plans to take off the world title off of Martinez and challenge Ippo for a 3rd time. Back at the gym, Takamura spits on Aoki's hair, which is important to the plot. Itadaki has another brief fight where he wins via decision, and the boys find a bike track to do their road work. The place is full of dog crap, and Takamura runs right into it. He blames Wampo and jumps into the sea and dips into the unknown. Seeking revenge on Aokimura for no reason, Takamura decides to throw some dog crap at him, not wanting to be the only one covered in it, but to his surprise, all the dog crap is gone. Desperate for a solution, Takamura takes a dump himself and hurls at Aoki's bald head, blaming Ippo for it. Itadaki's big match against Hoshi was coming up, so Aokimura trash-talked how Itadaki never improves alongside them, and he gossiped all the blame on their coach Shinoda. Shinoda overheard all of this and requested to be released as a coach. The only condition for him to stay was if Itadaki won this fight against Hoshi, which put more pressure on Itadaki since he already had to fight a super strong opponent. If he lost, not only would he lose his rankings and his coach, but the guy who beat him would get to fight Ippo for the title. Itadaki focused up and was determined to win. Hoshi charged right at him and something strange began to happen. Itadaki saw saw Hoshi in slow motion and then delivered the most awesome counter in the entire series, sending Hoshi crashing down to the mat. Shinodon mentioned that Itadaki finally unleashed his potential and was now fighting with full confidence. Whatever Hoshi threw at him, Itadaki dodged casually, making it look too easy. Then Itadaki threw a series of punches that sent Hoshi down to the mat for good. Hoshi tried to give a rah-rah speech, claiming it wasn't over, but trust me, I covered the storyline and it's over for Hoshi. At the fishing boat business, Ippo realized how much of a toll his mother endures when she works. Since his fight with Miyata was coming up, Ippo decided it would be his last professional fight. He would be satisfied with the outcome either way and wanted to help his mom out more. However, Miyata suddenly appeared, bent to his knees, and deeply apologized. Ippo was confused and Miyata bluntly cancelled the match. Ippo still couldn't understand why, but Miyata got up and left, saying they just weren't fated to fight. Ippo spent the entire day trying to process what happened and left deeply disappointed. Kamogawa was rightfully furious about the cancellation. It was Ippo's rematch, the press already knew and they were just destroying their trust with them. In the end, Kamogawa told Miyata Sr. that he was cutting all ties with them and never wanted to be associated with them ever again. At training, Ippo struggled since he no longer had a goal to look up to. Kamogawa tried to cheer him up by telling him to look forward, to aim for greater fighters, but Ippo was still hurt. This got Kamogawa enraged and he ordered Ippo to leave. Amidst Ippo's depression phase, Mari appeared and cheered him up. She mentioned that despite his 19-fight KO record, his fists were still small. She told him that he carries all the dreams and aspirations of the boxers he's fought in his fists, and quitting over something sissy like not fighting your boyfriend was a whack reason for giving up. Ippo remembered that Date told him the same thing and came to the realization that he hadn't yet achieved his true potential. He couldn't let the dreams of others down and needed to carry the torch for a greater good. And maybe, just maybe, by doing so he'll find the true answer to what it takes to become strong. Ippo returned to the gym and begged Kamogawa for guidance. Kamogawa explained that Ippo was still too green to challenge Martinez. To rise through the world rankings, he needed to work his way up by first becoming the top ranked fighter. To achieve this, Ippo had to become the uncrowned champion of the OPBF and challenge other national boxers from the Pacific region to advance his rankings. Ippo accepted this challenge and set to become stronger, with his first opponent being the Thai featherweight champion Scratch J Jimmy Sisva. The Kamogawa boys returned from their training camp and were surprised to learn that Ippo would be having another match soon. At this point, Itadaki was forbidden from sparring with Ippo, as Ippo would be facing powerhouses in the near future, and the concern was for Itadaki to avoid sustaining damage from sparring with him. It was revealed that Jimmy Sisva is the same guy Miyata fought and developed the jolt counter against, as seen in both in the anime and the manga. Ever since the match, Jimmy has become somewhat unhinged, having fought a total of 45 times with only 7 losses. He averaged almost 9 fights per year, and it shows. When his plane landed in Japan, the scars on his face were visible, hence his nickname Scratch J. The moment he arrived, he was baffled by the Japanese people and remembered his fight with Miyata, and was yapping about the Fist of God. At the weigh-ins, Jimmy's presence intimidated Ippo so much that he hid behind Kamogawa. When it was revealed that this fight was crucial for advancing on the world stage, Jimmy asked if Miyata would be watching. It was confirmed that there was a high possibility as Miyata saw Ippo as his rival. This answer invigorated Jimmy and he swore to KO Ippo with the hands of God. Later we learned that during his match with Miyata, Jimmy claimed to have seen God, who awarded him with the hands of God to become a great boxer. It's heavily hinted that Jimmy is suffering from brain damage, as his obsession with this God and his struggle to put words together are apparent, so I can't help but to feel bad for him. On the day of the fight, Kamogawa's strategy was to stop Jimmy from getting too close to Ippo by not allowing him to charge. Ippo was ready to comply, but when the match began, Jimmy took a few steps back and charged at Ippo with full speed dash. This single punch drove Ippo into the corner and Jimmy charged again right into the corner and gave Kamogawa a jump scare. Ippo realized that he was fighting against a wild boar and needed to adjust. However, all he could do was block while Jimmy kept delivering powerful punches and dashing back to repeat the pattern. Ippo had to adapt quickly and decided to charge in faster to land quicker blows. He started landing liver shots and solid hits to put Jimmy at a disadvantage, but Jimmy twisted his body and used all his weight to deflect Ippo's fists. He was mimicking Miyata's jolt counter but with his own spin, calling it the Tornado Jolter. He used the move against and actually hit Ippo, making Ippo do a full backflip and crash into the mat. The ref, however, called it a slip as Ippo and Jimmy's fists crossed, essentially causing Jimmy to lift Ippo. Somehow the this freaking ref sees an impossible to see high caliber slip, but can't see obvious fouls even the crowd is able to catch, like the mod match that was Mashiba vs Takamura. In the second round, Ippo charged at Jimmy again, landing solid blows. Jimmy went for another thunder jolt, which Ippo dodged, but it was just a setup for a follow-up jolter from the other arm. Ippo took that hit head on, barely surviving it, but reassured Kamugawa that he was fine. Ippo had to come up with something, so he decided to attack Jimmy when he was wide open, right when Jimmy was throwing a punch. Both exchanged blows, with Ippo on the verge of giving up, while Jimmy was dashing right into Ippo's corner. But just in time, Ippo collapsed right into his chair as the bell rang. That was very nice too. Kamugawa wanted Ippo to continue just to pressure and throw hands like wild cavemen. Meanwhile, Takamura scissors Aoki's eyes. The round began and both charged at each other. Jimmy first jolted Ippo's fist away, but Ippo also put all his weight into his leg, and both punched each other's fists, sending shockwaves through the arena. Ippo continued his strategy, and Jimmy realized that Ippo was also throwing jolts now. But not only that, Ippo threw multiple jolts, building momentum from the previous jolt. Jimmy was now getting overwhelmed, and both had a close infight where Ippo threw heavy punches until the round ended. Kamugawa saw Ippo's potential to do something unique with the jolts, so he ordered Ippo to combine the jolt into an uppercut to finish Jimmy off, which Ippo accepted. Jimmy was not about to give up either, as he wanted to take his god all the way to the world stage. So when the round began, both were again in a close infighting contest. Jimmy threw the jolts like crazy while Ippo dodged and used his dodging momentum to throw a jolt uppercut, which didn't connect and both men's heads collided. Now they were both covered in blood and Ippo couldn't see, so Jimmy took this opportunity and threw a jolt which almost sent Ippo down, until Ippo literally saw the god in the lights. Ippo came back to his senses and we get to see the coolest ending sequence to a fight and our first tease of the diagonal Dempsey roll that Ippo would use in the near future. Ippo threw another jolt and used the momentum to transition into the Dempsey roll, as he would later do in the story. Jimmy tried to counter with one last jolt, but Ippo dodged it, used the Dempsey roll momentum to perform a jolt counter uppercut, and from the lights saw the god, who was Kamugawa with the mitts, ready to hit the target with a devastating uppercut, which tore Ippo's leg muscles and sent Jimmy flying down to the mat for good. It only took one punch from this proto-diagonal Dempsey roll to finish off an opponent who otherwise didn't budge to any of Ippo's attacks. This is the very first time we see this evolved state of the Dempsey roll that Ippo will develop in the future, where he uses his momentum to throw uppercuts and transition back into the Dempsey roll. It is a nice teaser. Jimmy then got back up and saw Ippo for the last time. When he woke up, he noted that he had seen the devil himself and no longer wanted to box, saying he was going to retire. He also said it was God who gave Ippo his last bit of strength to finish him off. This was also the fight where Ippo got his nickname, Fujin, meaning the god of wind. Characters like Kamugawa and Takamura realized Ippo's newest potential with the free roam Dempsey roll and how destructive it could be to finish off his opponents like Miyata. But unfortunately, we won't see any improvement on the Dempsey roll for another 300 chapters. On his way back home, Ippo also accepted that he might never fight Miyata and needed to go his own path to greatness. After the fight, Ippo was fishing when Kumi appeared and asked him out to go on a swimming date with her. Ippo would have gone, but he had cuts, bruises and torn muscles that needed to heal up first. Kumi also expressed her frustrations about always looking after Mashiba, saying he's reckless, aggressive all the time and puts so much pressure on things at home. She just wants Mashiba to make it back home safely and told Ippo that she feels relaxed when she's around him. Ippo also reveals to Itadaki that he has moved on and tries to find new goals by moving up to the world stage. Itadaki, however, confronted Ippo about his lackluster goals, saying Ippo should not be satisfied with the intent of having a good match and just enter a ring with the mentality to win, since a lot of people look up to him, including Itadaki. Both men are then interrupted by the little chiz Sakaguchi. Sakaguchi promised to Ippo a world title fight if he defeats the interim OPBF champion Randy Boy Jr., in which Ippo refused, stating that Miyata is the one going to fight him and he should not interfere. Then that little shiz heinously mentions that Miyata has no chance in hell since counters will be useless against Randy Boy Jr. and that fate will only repeat itself. Ippo wanted to learn more about that Randy fellow, so he wanted to watch some archived tapings of his and met up with Fuji. Miyata Sr. coincidentally also wanted to research Randy Boy Jr. the exact same time, so they both analyzed who he really is. They saw that Randy is a southpaw and thought that the reason why Miyata stated counters are useless against him is because he never faced a southpaw and had no experiences with them. However, in the tape fight, when the opponent went for a perfect counter, Randy himself himself landed a perfect straight that should not be possible if he's a southpaw. They came to the realization that Randy is both an orthodox and a southpaw and just shifts his stances whenever he chooses, making it impossible to land a direct counter. Miyata Sr. then had a panic attack and also realized why Miyata is so obsessed with Randy. It is because the boxer that ended Miyata Sr.'s career is the father of Randy Boy Jr. He ended it the exact same way, where Randy Boy Sr. just switch hitted Miyata Sr. to cancel his counter and end his career. Miyata would not let that slide and wanted to prove that his father's boxing was not for nothing and wants to bring it all the way to the world stage, but first needs to finish off Randy Boy Jr. for vengeance. Back at the gym, Maron appears. Cool. Who's Maron? He's a freelance trainer and the boys just accept him just walking into the gym and training them. He then disses Kamogawa of how whack they are, so Ippo was not going to let that one slide and wanted to mid-train with Maron. Maron of course could not keep up with Ippo and stumbled outside the ring. Takamura then appeared and was happy to see Maron and reveals that Maron was a boxer of the gym before anyone else joined and was Takamura's sparring partner, and due to the injuries Takamura inflicted, he chickened out of becoming a pro boxer. Aokimuro went after him and then gave him a good beating. At the gym, the boys learn that Kamogawa has been arrested. Ippo and Yagi go to get him released and discover that Kamogawa went to visit a coach buddy of his to get information about Ippo's next opponent, since one of the coach's boxers had recently fought him. However, Kamogawa got enraged for some reason and started beating the coach up. They learned that the fight was fixed, meaning they paid the opponent hush money to take a loss. The opponent is none other than the Filipino featherweight champion, the magician Malcolm Ghetto. The Japanese boxer that Malcolm had a fixed loss against approached the Kamogawa gym, wanting to prove that he wasn't a fraud. He was ranked 7th in the nation, but Ippo knocked him down with a single punch. The guy was too proud to accept a fake victory over a world-ranked boxer, but deep down he knew it was all staged. He wanted Ippo to redeem them by defeating Malcolm. Ippo analyzed Malcolm's matches and something seemed off about him. Somehow, despite being almost the same size as Ippo, he could throw punches from a far distance. There was some conflict over whether Ippo should face Ghetto, but both Ippo and Kamogawa were determined to fight him. Back at the gym, Takamura was beating up Aoki with Kamogawa's cane until he accidentally hit Kamogawa with it. Ghetto's camp wanted to negotiate with Ippo's team about the fight, but they only cared about the money and didn't even know who Ippo was or what his achievements were. This enraged Kamogawa and he decided that Ippo needed special training to make Ghetto pay. Ippo was invited to Mashiba's gym to spar with him in preparation for Ghetto's unusual long-range punches, since Mashiba naturally has a long reach. Initially, both Ippo and Mashiba didn't want to fight each other, since Ippo is scared of Mashiba while Mashiba hates his guts. But since Mashiba needed a suitable sparring partner for his OPBF title fight after his suspension ends, Ippo was the perfect choice. So, the rematch of the decade finally happens. Mashiba unleashes the flicker jabs, now with an improved reach. Ippo weaves in, gets within Mashiba's range and delivers a liver blow. Mashiba retaliates, leading Ippo into a trap and landing a devastating uppercut. Ippo, now determined, unleashes the Dempsey roll right there. Mashiba tries to keep Ippo at a distance, but Ippo closes the gap and lands the Dempsey roll on Mashiba's body. As Mashiba lowers his guard, Ippo lands a headshot, but Mashiba counters with another uppercut. Both fighters are beaten up but ready to keep going until the scene cuts to Mashiba angrily taking a shower, frustrated by the injuries Ippo inflicted on him, while Ippo admits defeat. The next day, Malcolm Ghetto personally visits the Kamogawa gym to negotiate the prize money. He manages to get under Kamogawa's skin, leading Kamogawa to bet 1 million yen and then 2 million yen in a winner-takes-all match, which would be around $35,000 in today's money. Ippo and Ghetto finally come face to face, but Ghetto doesn't even recognize who Ippo is and calls him a boy before leaving the building. The disrespect towards the Kamogawa gym was mounting, and it was starting to frustrate everyone. At weigh-ins, Ippo was in a good shape, while Ghetto didn't make the cut and demanded Kamogawa to pay more if he wanted Ghetto to make the weight. So Ghetto took off his clothes and was ready to fight. While Ghetto was undressed, we see that the guy has gunshot wounds, meaning he really is into some dirty business. On top of the 2 million yen, Kamogawa also bet 500,000 yen of his own money to raise the stakes. When Ippo went to check out the ring, he saw Ghetto, and there Ippo said how much of a piece of work Ghetto really is. Ghetto revealed that he had a business of pickpocketing and as a result got shot multiple times but survived. In the ring he feels safe, scamming other boxers, sabotaging matches and betting with money. Ippo was visibly furious, and on top of all the money, he also bet 500,000 yen. This meant if Ghetto won, he would get 3 million yen, which is about $52,000. Ippo then realized that he didn't have 500,000 yen on the hand and asked the boys to bring him money. Itadaki gave 50,000, Aokimura gave a total of 300,000, while Mr. World Champion gave 30 yen. Both Aoki and Kimura revealed that they stole it from their registers, which put even more pressure on Ippo. If he lost, he wouldn't be able to pay his friends back. In the ring, Ghetto gave Ippo one last chance to fix the match, letting Ippo win while Ghetto would take more money, which made Ippo even more furious. When the match began, Ippo charged right at him and started to throw hands, managing to down Ghetto in the first few seconds of the match. Of course, Ghetto got back up from the knockdown. Ippo charged at Ghetto again, but Ghetto extended his arms. Ippo responded with another punch, but Ghetto suddenly vanished and was chilling in the corner. Ippo tried to charge back at him, but Ghetto used the same trick, and this time Ippo actually slipped. Ippo refocused and was now able to see through Ghetto, but he still couldn't land a punch. Ippo stuck with the same strategy until Coach Kamogawa gave the order to look at Ghetto's feet. Now Ippo could follow Ghetto and deliver a body blow right as the round ended. In the second round, Ippo focused on Ghetto's feet again, but Ghetto extended his arms and stopped Ippo from dashing into him. Throughout the round, Ippo tried to step in, but Ghetto kept him at bay until the end, feeling satisfied with himself. Kamogawa suggested to Ippo to aim a dual exchange to at least hurt Ghetto. So in the third round, Ippo charged like a wild boar and almost hit Ghetto's stupid face. Ippo landed some light hits while also tanking Ghetto's jabs. Ippo eventually got into Ghetto's reach and wanted to throw hands, but Ghetto pulled an uppercut out of nowhere that shocked the whole crowd. Even Coach Kamogawa looked concerned about what Ippo should do next. This pattern continued for several rounds. Each time Ippo tried to get close, Ghetto just jabbed him away, preventing Ippo from closing the distance. This went until the sixth round, where Ippo had taken so much damage he was getting sluggish. The Kamogawa boys were now getting concerned that Ippo might lose the bout, so Aoki analyzed the heck out of Ghetto and actually figured out Ghetto's magic trick. Itadaki came down and gave a weird riddle about the trick, and Kamogawa had to explain it to Ippo. When the round ended, Ippo fell into the chair. Kamogawa told Ippo to keep using the same strategy, but now he needed to watch his own neck and hit harder. Kamogawa failed to explain Ghetto's trick clearly, which was just Ghetto loosening his gloves so he could extend his reach. This didn't make much sense since Ippo had fought long-range opponents in the past and just had a spar with Mashiba, but anyway, Ippo tried to get closer again and succeeded by imagining Kamogawa holding his neck, which helped him to get close enough to Ghetto. Ippo then needed to immobilize Ghetto, so he unconsciously threw a heartbreak shot that Date used, stopping Ghetto from moving. He followed it up with a most devastating punch of the fight, where Ippo almost pulverized Ghetto's stupid face. Ippo was now moving in and Ghetto felt intimidated. Ippo charged in and delivered two powerful body blows, but Ghetto jabbed him, and that was enough to send Ippo into an almost unconscious state. After piling up all the damage, Ippo could barely move. He survived the round but accidentally sat on Ghetto's corner. Kamogawa tried to revive Ippo by placing ice cold hands on his face, which actually worked, and Ippo was ready to give his best in the next round. However, Ghetto transitioned from jabs to straights and started landing heavy punches on Ippo. It was getting so bad that Kamogawa ordered Yagi to throw in the towel, but just as Yagi was about to do it, Ippo suddenly dodged. Kamogawa grabbed the towel and Ippo, now getting used to Ghetto's style, threw another body blow. Ippo wasn't letting Ghetto get away and unleashed a flurry of punches, landing a devastating liver blow that sent Ghetto to the mat. Ghetto got back up, comparing the situation to being crucified, with Ippo firing cannon shots at him. Ghetto tried his best to keep Ippo away, but Ippo just blasted his fists anyway. Ghetto, in his infinite stupidity, thought it would be a good idea to challenge Ippo to an all-out brawl, and of course, he got hammered. Ippo was practically punching dead meat at this point, as Ghetto slowly and questionably slid down to Ippo, his broken down body collapsing flat to the mat, ending the match. Ippo's face was swollen, so when they went to see the doctor, they ran into Ghetto. Kamogawa gave Ghetto the reward money he would have normally received if it had been a standard non-betting fight. Ghetto accepted it and revealed that he would continue scamming other boxers in the future. He also warned Ippo and Kamogawa about the real monster, the OPBF interim champion Randy Boy Jr. The next day, Aoki, Itadaki and Kimura felt left out since Ippo and Takamura were literally carrying the gym, so Shinoda gave them the opportunity to join the Class A tournament, where the winner gets a shot at the national title. The following day, Itadaki brought new members to the gym, and together with Ippo, they watched their pro test. In the hall, they saw Kurosawa and Saeki, two of Ippo's previous previous opponents, who revealed that they plan to join the Class A tournament too, aiming to challenge Ippo for the title. This meant that Itadaki would have to fight Ippo's former opponents, and to add salt to the wounds, neither of these men even knew who Itadaki was, despite him being ranked 8th. Itadaki wouldn't let them pass to fight her senpai and became even more motivated. The next day, Kumi wanted Ippo to watch Mashiba's return fight with her, since she's still too afraid to watch another one of her brother's matches after the Takamura fight. By the way, the new prospects that Ippo and Itadaki had watched during their pro license test quit, and Aokimura clowned Itadaki for it. Randy Boy Jr. finally arrived in Japan and crushed all his sparring partners, desperately needing a suitable one. So Itadaki, eagerly to prove himself, volunteered to spar with a world-ranked champion. Ippo went with Itadaki and gave Randy some seriously intimidating looks. The spar began and Randy threw jabs which focused Itadaki dodged with ease. He even managed to hit Randy a few times, forcing Randy to take him seriously. Then suddenly the scene cut to Itadaki face down to the mat, wondering what just happened. Itadaki quickly got back up and maintained his rhythm, only to realize that Randy had shifted his stance to southpaw and easily countered Itadaki while he was throwing a punch. Sakaguchi then laughed at how pathetic Itadaki looked, saying that after they were done with Miyata they would aim to challenge Ricardo Martinez. But Randy was too distracted by Ippo's presence and wanted to spar with him. Ippo saw the opportunity to fight the boxer who had taken his rival away and entered the ring. We were so close to greatness seeing an actual match, but that little shiz interfered and called off the spar, saying it would be bad if a world-ranked Ippo hurt Randy, who was set to fight Miyata soon, and they then left. Imai then appeared, revealing that he had sparred with Miyata alongside another southpaw boxer but couldn't lay a scratch on Miyata's pretty face at all. This still gives hope that Miyata might actually pull off a win. Sano first made his way to the Kamogawa gym to announce he is on an ass-kicking spree, then went on his way to Miyata's gym. Ippo followed them after and sneakily watched through the windows the whole confrontation. Sano jokingly threw a punch at Miyata, in exchange Miyata threw a glove at him. They got ready to spar in the ring, with Sano just charging at him, only to get jabbed back. Sano tried to smash Miyata, but Miyata casually countered the smash. Sano got dominated in the first round, but that was all according to his plan. In the second round he went closer without a guard to dodge Miyata's punches easier, and threw motionless jabs at Miyata, which managed to corner him and then land his big guns. Sano managed to get decent hits on Miyata, but the spar ended with Miyata dodging the last punch and calling it quits. Ippo then watched his boyfriend Miyata cheat on him with Randy Boy Jr. for the unified OPBF featherweight title, where Miyata won and Ippo's goon brain completely shut off. The following day, Ippo did his usual road work and ran into Kumi. They planned to meet up for Mashiba's comeback fight and had a conversation going until Ippo scared her, and she fell onto a cardboard box. They had a massive stare down and almost smooch at the moment, until the Kamogawa boys caught up to Ippo and Kumi slipped down the hill. Ippo felt like he achieved something and compared the situation to infighting with Ricardo Martinez, feeling very satisfied, while Kumi was just disappointed that they didn't kiss, and got frustrated by the slightest mention of the word slip. The next day, Ippo got news about the new champion he has to fight in the Pacific region. The next champion on the list was the Indonesian featherweight champion, who was practically unknown. The only information they had on him was that he only fought 3 matches and a video depicting an Indonesian island where Ippo's opponent briefly appeared. Then we get introduced to Wally, a boy who grew up with monkeys and adapted their way of living, possessing the mobility, agility and the instincts of a monkey. His trainer is also the same trainer who trained Hawk and was the soldier that raised Kamogawa's fist after his victory against Anderson, indicating his importance in the story. Before coming to Japan, they made a detour to New York for a spar against Volk, who was world ranked first in the junior lightweight division. During that spar, Wally gave Volk a real challenge, so much so that Volk and his coach needed to call Coach Kamogawa and Ippo to let them know that Wally is no joke, and under no circumstances should he be allowed near the corner, as this is where he has the most freedom. On the day of the weigh-ins, it appeared that Wally was having the time of his life getting to meet Ippo, as according to him, Ippo will show him the greatness of boxing and how much fun it could be. It is evident that Wally does not take the sport that seriously and views it as a means to have fun. That is why on the day of the fight, in the first round of the match, Ippo already scored a knockdown on him. But Wally's coach understood that Ippo would give him a hard time in this fight, so he yelled out freedom, prompting Wally to make a complete 180 in his boxing stance and start dodging Ippo's punches like he's in the Matrix. At first glance, Wally's boxing style was almost reminiscent of Hawk's style, with his dodges and punches punches coming from seemingly impossible angles. However, he then began to incorporate moves like the smash and flicker jabs into his arsenal, showcasing that he not only emulates Hawk but also adds real boxing techniques to his arsenal. Then Ippo's and Kamogawa's strategy was to corner Wally, even though both of them had been warned not to do so by Walk and Daneki. Nonetheless, they proceeded and almost succeeded in cornering Wally. However, something really weird happened. Wally used the ropes to levitate and pulled himself back quickly, surprising Ippo by repeatedly punching him. He did this too many times during the fight, making it feel unnatural and unrealistic. Wally jumped high, used the ropes as his advantage, and could even drift punch Ippo unconscious. Wally repeated these maneuvers throughout multiple chapters, seemingly pulling these moves out of thin air, and Ippo could do nothing to counter them. Eventually, by chance, Ippo managed to corner Wally and thought it was his chance to finally inflict some damage on him. However, he should have listened to Walk's advice and ended up being knocked unconscious by Wally's unorthodox boxing style. It was only after Ippo was knocked out cold that he suddenly remembered Walk's words about not cornering Wally. Ippo's and Kamogawa's strategy then shifted to targeting Wally's midsection to slow him down and create openings for counterattacks. However, Wally saw through the strategy and continued dominating Ippo without Ippo laying a hand on him. It became so effortless for Wally to land punches on Ippo that he was getting bored and engaged in a slugfest with him. In a moment of desperation, Ippo managed to land a slight blow on Wally, further enraging him. Although it seemed futile to inflict any damage at all, their next goal was to do whatever it took to make even the smallest impact on Wally's lower body. Wally anticipated their strategy and increased his speed, and on the process denies all laws of physics as he relentlessly pummeled Ippo. The situation grew increasingly dire for Ippo, who was on the verge of losing consciousness but continued enduring the punishment in a desperate attempt to win against Wally. It was getting so bad that Kamogawa almost threw in the towel, only to hesitate when he saw Ippo's determination to win. In the next round, Ippo realized he couldn't endure any more punishment and decided to unleash all his strength in the hopes of landing a lucky punch on Wally. Fortunately, the accumulated taps Ippo had delivered to Wally throughout the round started to take their toll, hindering Wally's footwork. This allowed Ippo to catch up to him and land some solid punches. As Wally struggled to maintain his composure against Ippo's overwhelming strength, he began to panic. However, when it came to exchanging blows, nobody could match Ippo's power, leaving Wally overwhelmed and ultimately saved by the bell. It became evident that Ippo had indeed made an impact on Wally's body, as his footwork was now completely compromised. In the final round, they continued to exchange blows until Wally found himself cornered and saw the opportunity to counter Ippo once again. Determined to finish the match, Ippo unleashed the Dempsey roll. Despite Wally's attempts to evade it, Ippo increased the speed to the maximum, preventing Wally from escaping, and delivered a powerful punch to immobilize him. In a last-ditch effort, Wally tried to counter Ippo, but failed and was knocked unconscious. Recognizing the severity of the situation, Wally's coach threw in the towel to prevent him from sustaining permanent damage, a decision Coach Kamogawa had hesitated to make. Ultimately, it was Ippo who collapsed at the end of the fight, while Wally walked away with his head held high, smiling at an unconscious Ippo. Coach Kamogawa and Miguel then met up again, and Miguel congratulated both of them by offering them some bananas. He was impressed by Ippo's determination to not give up and by his immense strength, but he also warned Kamogawa that this very determination and strength could be their ultimate downfall. He cautioned that they often rush headfirst into fights without reconsidering their strategy or knowing when to give up. After this fight, we see Mari meeting up with Itadaki, and she drops something very interesting. She says that Ippo possesses things that Itadaki deeply desires: a girlfriend, power, and world ranking. Itadaki tries to play it off as something silly, but at the same evening, he has an inner crisis about people having expectations of him and wanting to reach Ippo's level. So he aimed to defeat Karasawa in the Class A tournament faster than it took Ippo to defeat him. The next fight was Itadaki vs Karasawa, and Itadaki tried to finish the fight as soon as possible. He was dominating throughout the first half of the first round until Karasawa shifted gears and managed to overwhelm Itadaki. In the second round, Itadaki was desperate to surpass Ippo, so he focused up and was moving in a little too fast. He threw endless jabs and went for a knockout, only to realize that Karasawa was already down. Not only had he won the fight, but he also defeated Karasawa faster than Ippo had. Ippo came backstage to congratulate Itadaki, who was sleeping on the bench, and then something very ominous happened. In an unconscious state, Itadaki maliciously reached out to Ippo until he snapped back to his senses and held himself back. Aokimura also had their matches and advanced further, with only 2 panels shown. The next day, Kimura was on his way back home and ran into a girl from his neighborhood that he takes care of from time to time and promised that he would take her to the amusement park the next day. The boys were all at Kimura's house and wanted to celebrate their wins, so the conversation shifted to girls, and it turns out Kimura is the only single guy among them and never gets girls. The boys also discovered manga magazines and anime figures in Kimura's room that belonged to that little girl, but they confused it with Kimura being a ditty. Kimura then lied to the boys saying they belonged to his girlfriend so they would shut up and he wouldn't look like a loser. The next day, Itadaki asked Mari out to the amusement park, and this guy just did everything wrong that you could possibly do wrong on a date, like not giving the girl attention and making corny jokes. But the important thing is that Mari picked up on the fact that Itadaki aimed to defeat Karasawa faster than it took Ippo to beat him, and she wondered if he would do the same against Saiki. Right on time, Ippo and Kumi along with Aoki and Tomiko appeared, and they all discussed that Kimura might be Dr. Disrespect because he's a weird weeb, and they called him. To their surprise, right when Kimura picked up the phone, he appeared with the little girl and lied again, saying he was with his girlfriend. Aoki did the right thing and called the cops on his childhood friend for being a weirdo. Kimura was detained, but he explained he just wanted to get some cupcakes, so he was released. It's been a while since Ippo last defended his title, as everyone in Japan feared facing him in the ring. However, this time he received a challenge from the ranked lightweight boxer who fully believed that he could defeat Ippo for the Japanese championship. Hisato Kojima, a heavy puncher type that could easily knock out his opponents in one punch. Still, he had a severe drawback in his boxing style that was holding him back, and that was his speed. During a sparring session against Miyata, Miyata noted that he couldn't possibly win against Ippo since he wasn't qualified enough to defeat a world-ranked monster like Ippo. Kojima laughed at Miyata for his foolish comments and claimed that he knew Ippo's biggest weakness, a secret known only to him. He asserted that he was the only one capable of exploiting this weakness to defeat Ippo. Later on, when Ippo and the Kamogawa boys attended a random boxing match, they randomly ran into Kojima, who was cheering for one of his kohais. Ippo introduced himself and wished him good luck for their upcoming fight. However, for absolutely no reason, Kojima started talking trash about Ippo's previous opponents, such as Sendo and Sawamura, two of Ippo's most formidable opponents. He claimed that they were nothing but jobbers, weak enough for Ippo to beat. According to Kojima, they lacked the brain and tactics to exploit Ippo's weakness, reiterating that he was the only one capable of defeating him using that weakness. While Kojima wouldn't stop talking about Ippo's weakness, Ippo gave him a cold look, angered by Kojima's disrespect towards his previous opponents, who had also trained hard for boxing. Ippo left with a better expression, clearly irritated by Kojima's stupid comments. The next day, in the boxing magazines, Ippo reads a comment about Kojima where he once again claims to know Ippo's weakness. He continues to trash talk not only Sendo and Sawamura but all of Ippo's opponents, stating that they lost because they were weak and unaware of the weakness. Ippo rightfully becomes even more enraged, commenting that this guy talks a lot and deserves a good beating. And Ippo's right in this. Why is Kojima so obsessed with Ippo's weakness and constantly trash talking his previous opponents? We then learn that Kojima is in fact a big fan of Ippo. He watches his tapes regularly, almost every day, and over time noticed that Ippo's boxing, though impressive and world-ranking material, has a weakness that nobody else noticed. Since Kojima himself felt the need to accomplish something in his boxing career and face his biggest boxing idol, he took it upon himself to challenge Ippo for the featherweight title by moving from lightweight to featherweight. Kojima is a hard hitter but, in contrast, very slow. So, what is this weakness that he believes only he can utilize to defeat Ippo? When asked the same question to Miyata, he stated that Ippo, despite being world ranked and an excellent boxer, has a weakness that could be his downfall. In each and every fight Ippo is involved in, he charges directly into his opponents without good footwork or strategy, like a truck driving towards a person. If utilized correctly, you can counter this with the right strategy, but countering a directly charging Ippo without a strategy would be suicide. That is what Kojima is aiming for. Since he possesses a powerful right hook, he believes that with Ippo charging right into him, he can counter him with a punch he claims to be equal to a 2-ton collision. But why does he continuously trash talk Ippo's previous opponents? On the day of the weigh-ins, we see Ippo in his best form due to his training in preparation for this title fight. Then we see Kojima almost dry up to the bones since he had to drop 2 weight classes. When asked about their upcoming fight, Ippo initially did not want to give a comment about it. However, Kojima, as always, began to talk shit about Ippo's previous opponents again. When he saw that it was not working as it used to, he began to talk trash about Coach Kamogawa instead, saying that whoever trained Ippo is doing a horrendous job and and is the reason for Ippo's weakness. Ippo could no longer hold back and was visibly pissed. He warned Kojima about what is about to come in a fight tomorrow. On the day of the fight, Ippo initially seemed calm and relaxed, even though he was visibly annoyed every time he heard Kojima's trash talk. However, when it was time for him to go out and defend his title, he turned cold again, stating that he wouldn't take long for him to finish the fight. On the other side, we see that Kojima felt guilty deep down for always harassing Ippo with his stupid comments. He wanted Ippo to take him seriously during their build-up by angering him and training intensely, so Ippo would be in his best shape. And it worked. Ippo took it upon himself and trained for this match unlike all of his other matches. What Kojima did not expect was for Ippo to take it personally and enter that match full of rage, wanting to unleash all of his anger on Kojima. Takamura noticed that Ippo was looking to brawl with Kojima and abandon his usual boxing style, so he told Itadaki that he should warn Ippo to cool off and treat his fight like a boxing match. Instead of delivering this message to Ippo, Itagaki kept it for himself, wanting to see Ippo go all out in a fight for once. He always wondered what the serious Ippo would look like in the ring. So, when the bell rang, both fighters were ready to beat each other up. But for a solid 1 minute and 3 real chapters, they both stood there looking at each other. If Kojima's plan of Ippo charging right at him did not come to fruition, he would have been screwed. Then he noticed that Ippo was charging up his muscles, preparing to deliver powerful punches when he moved in. Ippo started to weave in, but abandoned his peekaboo style and charged right into Kojima to knock him out. Everything went according to Kojima's plan, and Ippo took a direct 2-ton heavy collision from Kojima. At this point, everyone thought that it was over for Ippo. However, in Ippo's inner world, he saw his previous opponents that Kojima disrespected fading away. Along with them, Coach Kamugawa, whom Kojima talked mad trash about, also faded away. Ippo came back to his senses without going down and was ready to unleash a devastating blow on Kojima. Instead of dodging, moving away or defending himself, Kojima stupidly accepted his fate and was ready to tank the upcoming punch. What that dumbass was not expecting was that the single punch unleashed Ippo's inner monster, sending Kojima flying across the ring. It was a one-punch first round KO for Ippo, and he was quickly taken backstage for the upcoming world title fight, where he was left alone and lost consciousness from the counter Kojima gave him. Next was Takamura's fight, and he was doing something different. He painted his bear fur white so it looked like a panda, only for the crowd to go ballistic and give him legitimate heat. It got so bad that they started to cheer for his opponent Peter Rabbitson to win the fight, which he was actually doing. Takamura tried again to end the fight as soon as possible by being reckless and throwing white punches that did not connect. It was the 12th round and Rabbit was leading with points. If Takamura did not KO him this round, he would lose the fight and his title. The crowd was just too brutal on Takamura. Even characters like Sano and Data were roasting him, which Takamura could hear from the roaring crowd somehow. The crowd chanted Rabbitson's name, and he was baffled that the hometown boxer was getting booed. This gave him false self-confidence, and he got too eager and started to attack Takamura with heavy punches. He got too greedy and Takamura one-punched KO'd him, which infuriated the crowd, and Takamura was booed out of the building again. In a bar, Data, Mashiba, Sando, Okita, Saiki and Kumi were discussing what a terrible performance Takamura displayed. What they didn't notice was Takamura was just sitting next to them and blocked the doors so they couldn't escape. Takamura kind of gave them a chance to redeem themselves by apologizing, only for a wasted AG Data to further roast him about how silly his panda costume looked. Takamura was ready to brawl with them, which a wasted Data accepted, and all the other characters had no other choice but to comply. They charged right at Takamura only for Sando to fly away. All the other characters held Takamura for Data to land a finishing blow, only for the page to cut, where we see every character completely annihilated, especially Data. Ippo then helped Umazawa by drawing on his manga, but Ippo does more damage than helping him, and they both discuss the Class A tournament and how Itadaki is going to fight against Saiki. They also talk about Aokimura's upcoming bouts and how this might be their last chance to prove that they belong in the world of boxing. Takamura called Ippo over to show him something very important alongside with Wampo, where Takamura jokes that Wampo has gotten big. Takamura then showed the important thing, which first happened to be a movie Takamura likes to watch, and then an actual match of Aoki. Takamura noted that Aoki closes his eyes while receiving punches, which is not good and needs to be dealt with, and gives Ippo the responsibility of telling Aoki. Ippo couldn't bring himself to tell Aoki he has a fear of receiving punches, so he accidentally says to him, "You have gotten big." However, the next day Takamura told the other boys about Aoki's weakness and they mocked him by singing a silly song. They decided to resolve the issue by figuring out out where Aoki's fear of punches came from, so Aoki got hypnotized and saw the tall man with a stupid haircut and thick eyebrows. Turns out Takamura is the reason for Aoki's fear of punches. The best way to overcome his fear was to face his trauma directly, with Takamura actually hitting him. They did this several times where Aoki almost literally died, and by the end of it he was dead inside. The KSA tournament finals happened next, where Itadaki got the same eye injury Saiki gave Ippo in that fight. Even so, Itadaki beat Saiki a few seconds faster than Ippo did. Aoki and Kimura both lost their fights, Aoki even got hospitalized, but in the end, they still came back. Ippo was in Kamogawa's office when Kamogawa revealed that it's time for Ippo to reach the world stage and fight a high-ranked boxer to then challenge Ricardo Martinez. The fighter Ippo will have to face is the second-ranked world boxer Alfredo Gonzalez. Woke's world title fight was announced, so Sano wanted to watch it together with Ippo and support their brothers from far away. Of course, Woke ended up winning the world title in a close fight. Ippo and Sano, pumped from witnessing that intense fight, were in an adrenaline rush and wanted to cool it off with a spar. The Kamogawa boys arrived at the gym and found Ippo barely conscious, hanging onto the ropes in the ring after the intense spar. Meanwhile, on his way back, Sano ran into Takamura and proudly announced that he had finally managed to kick Ippo's ass in a spar. Strangely, Takamura asked if Sano noticed that Ippo seemed weaker. Sano shrugged it off, claiming he had simply gotten stronger, and was eagerly awaiting Ippo's challenge to dethrone Ricardo Martinez. Back at the gym, Kamogawa informed Ippo that his match with Alfredo Gonzalez had been confirmed, prompting Ippo to relinquish the Japanese title. With that, it became Itadaki's responsibility to reclaim the title, and both of them would be competing at the same event. The next day, Ippo went to deliver some fish to Kumi, who invited him to stay for dinner. They flirted a bit, with Ippo sipping hard, and they almost smooshed again, until Mashiba came home and started interrogating Ippo about what they were doing. Mashiba also asked why Ippo's face was all messed up. Ippo explained he fought Sano and shared his intentions in boxing, saying that even though he's all banged up, he still wants to be able to walk home on his two own feet. Mashiba, unimpressed, called out Ippo's lackluster mindset towards challenging the world, stating that he too thought Ippo had gotten weaker. It was also revealed that Itadaki will face Imai again for the title, whom he previously defeated and has now become a bit smug. After almost 700 chapters, we finally see Ricardo Martinez again, who is on a phone call with Gonzalez. In their conversation, it's revealed that Gonzalez has only lost twice in his boxing career, both times to Ricardo, and he wants another rematch after he defeats Ippo. Martinez initially doesn't remember who Ippo is until his coach reminds him that he is the Japanese champion who uses the peekaboo technique. Ricardo's face then lights up as he tells his coach he wishes he would mention that earlier so he could warn Gonzalez about Ippo's strength. We learn that Gonzalez grew up in the streets and admired Ricardo's matches, especially since Ricardo would give free tickets to kids to watch. During Ricardo's fight against Date, he delivered a speech that inspired Alfredo to become a boxer, emphasizing the importance of machismo. AG Date reviewed Gonzalez's fights and noted that Gonzalez is nearly a copy of Ricardo Martinez, though he also senses a deep, aggressive side that Alfredo tries to hide. Ippo goes through one last final training montage before his fight with Gonzalez. All that is left is the battle itself. Alfredo lands in Japan and has been sparring with other featherweights. Imai in particular caught his attention, but thankfully that spar didn't happen. It would have been a brutal massacre for Imai. At the weigh-ins, Ippo and Alfredo finally come face to face. When asked how they felt about their upcoming match, Ippo gave a generic answer, while Alfredo answered from Ricardo's point of view, stating that he didn't expect much of Ippo. In the hall, Ippo wished Itadaki the best of luck before Itadaki entered the ring, where he was introduced with his nickname Kronos, the god of time. Imai also entered the ring, and the fight was set to begin. When the bell rang, Imai charged at Itadaki, who entered the Matrix to slow things down and tried to push Imai back. But Imai landed a gut punch and followed with a left hook, sending Itadaki down. Imai had prepared extensively for this rematch ever since his loss against Itadaki, studying every one of Itadaki's fights and memorizing his movements. He knew about Itadaki's ability to slow down time ever since their first fight where Itadaki unleashed the potential. And now, Imai took it upon himself to finally unseal the potential he unleashed from Itadaki. Both fighters exchanged blows and Imai managed to disrupt Itadaki's footwork. Imai threw another punch, and as Itadaki attempted to counter, it was clear his punch was now going too slow. Imai landed a decisive blow, knocking Itadaki out cold, and the match ended with Imai becoming the new featherweight champion. A devastated Itadaki congratulated Imai and then backstage broke down in frustration over losing and not fulfilling the promise he made with Ippo. And that's pretty much the last time Itadaki holds any real relevance in the story. He will be barely important button to the story ever again from now on. Ippo witnessed the whole fight and was now the event's last hope to make an impact for the Kamogawa gym. Ippo and Kamogawa had one final conversation to beat Gonzalez and then challenge Ricardo Martinez, while Gonzalez saw Ippo as just a stepping stone to fight Ricardo himself. Gonzalez even has the nickname Meltzli, meaning the Mexican Reaper. Both of them stood in the ring and the fight began. Ippo tried to move in, but predictably first had to get used to Gonzalez's long jabs, which he specifically trained for, since in Hajime no Ippo lore, Mexicans have these genetically coded jabs. Ippo got used to Alfredo's style and got into his reach, but failed to make a punch connect as Gonzalez deflected every blow, though he was still cautious about Ippo's monstrous strength. Alfredo got serious and sped up his jabs, landing some damage on Ippo. However, it took more than jabs to take Ippo down. Ippo ate the incoming jabs and pushed through them to deliver a liver blow, which Alfredo also managed to block. The second round began and both men continued with the same strategy. However, Miyata noted that Alfredo hadn't used his right fist even once and seemed to be waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike Ippo. Ippo managed to get in, where Alfredo baited him and finally used his right, landing it on Ippo, who absorbed it with his forehead. Ippo fell for the same pattern again and received another blow to the forehead, but this time he moved forward and delivered a successful liver blow of his own. Now it was an all-out infight, with Gonzalez aiming for Ippo's head while Ippo targeted Gonzalez's midsection until the end of the round. The third round began and both men increased their speed. Ippo used the same strategy to eat the jabs to get close to Gonzalez, but Gonzalez pulled a devastating left hook that sent Ippo crashing to the mat. This is the first time since Ippo's fight with Sanada that he went down. Ippo barely got back up to continue the fight and the round ended. The fight skips right into the middle of the fifth round, where we see Ippo all banged up, while Gonzalez has barely taken any damage. The atmosphere in the arena changed. All Ippo can do is take punches while holding himself from going down, but he still isn't able to land anything. Kamogawa even had a flashback of Wally and Miguel for some reason. At the end of the round, Ippo was given permission to use the Dempsey roll and unleashed it. Alfredo just stared at Ippo and finally snapped. He felt insulted by Ippo's lack of boxing IQ and now wanted to completely destroy Ippo with the Dempsey roll, showing his true colors. Alfredo slowly approached the Dempseying Ippo, looking to counter him head on as Ippo unleashed the Dempsey roll. It was a dangerous strategy and whoever got hit was going down, making for a scary sight with almost duel exchanges. Right on time, Ippo used the Dempsey counter, stopping his punch to let Alfredo throw his, then planned to land a clean hit. But Alfredo simply pushed forward and clinched with Ippo, stopping the Dempsey counter. They both got into an infight again. Now Gonzalez abandoned his cool-headed style and just went all out on Ippo. Ippo noticed Gonzalez's guard was loose and went for a body blow that transitioned into an uppercut, which Gonzalez barely managed to block at the last second. However, he still felt the impact. They exchanged punches and prepared to continue their infight, but Gonzalez unexpectedly went down. This gave Ippo the motivation that Kamogawa's teachings could work at the world level, while Kamogawa himself had another flashback of Wally and his coach. Gonzalez got back up and Ippo tried to finish him off while he was still weak, but the bell rang, ending the round. Gonzalez aimed to finish off Ippo in the 7th round, landing heavy punches on him. Ippo absorbed the damage and refused to go down. It was now or never, so Ippo threw everything he had to land a decisive blow on Gonzalez. Both men were now literally beating the life out of each other, but Alfredo had the upper hand in the infight. Ippo landed another deadly uppercut, sending Alfredo unconscious to the ropes. Ippo looked back at Kamogawa one last time, signaling that he would end the fight now. Kamogawa then finally understood why he remembered Wally and his coach. They warned him that Ippo was on a path to disaster if he didn't change his style, and Kamogawa realized this too late. Ippo charged in to finish Alfredo once and for all. Alfredo wasn't going to let his chance to fight Ricardo slip away, and risked everything to exchange this final blow with Ippo. It was a matter of who connected first, and unfortunately, Ippo got tapped first, punched into oblivion, and fell face first into the mat. Before the ref could even begin to count, Kamogawa rushed to Ippo, urging him to get back up, but Ippo didn't respond. At the same time, Takamura had an inner monologue wanting Kamogawa not to worry about Ippo as long as Takamura was still here. Ippo got up but fell onto Alfredo's shoulder, and Alfredo pushed him away. Ippo lost for a second time in his career, failing to conquer the world stage. When the arena was empty, Date consoled Takamura, saying everything would be okay and the sun will shine again. Takamura, however, wasn't convinced and shadowboxed his frustrations away in the empty arena. The very next day, Umezawa catches Kimura and Aoki just cuddling together and wonders where Ippo is. They realize he's out for his road work even though he's still injured, and might run into Takamura, who would bully putting him to death for his loss. As Ippo reflects on his defeat, he concludes that his boxing style isn't cut out for the world stage. He hates this feeling of losing and promises to improve on what he was lacking to make a big comeback. Just then Takamura appears, but contrary to what the Kamogawa boys expected, he doesn't mind Ippo's loss at all. He just acts like nothing happened. He even cracks a very Takamura-like joke that I unfortunately can't show on YouTube, but you can read for yourself. Kumi shows up to console Ippo and said that Mashiba misled her to believe that Ippo won, where he said that this fight had Ippo's best KO. When Kumi and Ippo finally get some time alone, she gets straight to the point. Why doesn't he just quit boxing? Ippo insists that he can't quit now, not while so many people are counting on him to improve and make an impact. But Kumi challenges his way of thinking, asking why he has to break his body just because people have expectations of him. Ippo has no real answer but promises her that if he loses again, he will retire for good. Later, Ippo meets up with Umazawa to take his mind off the loss, but Umazawa notices something concerning. Ippo can't even draw a straight line. Realizing just how badly Ippo needs to rest, he urges him to go home. We then see just how worried Umazawa is about Ippo's well-being. Time passes, Ippo heals up and he returns to the gym, where Kamogawa is waiting to confront Ippo about his loss. Ippo just says he didn't give his best and promises that next time he won't disappoint Kamogawa. However, Ippo's story takes a backseat for a moment as the Kamogawa gym has some big news. It was revealed that Takamura would have another world title fight, but this time instead of moving up another weight class, it would be a title unification bout for the middleweight championship. On the undercard, Sando and Mashiba would have their fights, as all the other Kamogawa boys had lost recently, which amused Takamura to the point that he became a complete goddamn degenerate. If that wasn't enough, he even went up to Aoki, gave him some cake, then hit him with a twerk until Aoki completely lost it. The next day, Kamogawa wanted Ippo to tag along with Takamura's training, which infuriated Takamura because he had to train alongside with a big loser. But this time, the tone shifted to a serious one. Takamura had a deep talk with Ippo, mentioning that Kamogawa was hurt by Ippo's loss and that Ippo just took that L without making excuses. Takamura then said that Ippo is simply not cut out for the world stage and drew a line in the dirt, saying that beyond that line is where real monsters reside. If Ippo wanted to remain human, he shouldn't cross it. Ippo wanted to step over it but hesitated, ultimately taking a detour to catch up to Takamura instead. Takamura just wanted Ippo to leave, but then bluntly revealed his true intentions for this unification match. It was just a roadblock to his actual goal of becoming the man to conquer 6 weight classes, so he didn't give a flying crap about the WBA middleweight champion Richard Bison. Mashiba had his next OPBF title defense, Sando defeated the Mexican featherweight champion and Ricardo Martinez's sparring partner Jose Nargo, and made it clear that Mexico should know he is coming after Alfredo Gonzalez next. Lastly came Takamura's unification fight, where he dominated early on until his blind eye and leg injury started kicking in and nearly cost him the match. All the Kamogawa boys were cheering ringside and Takamura only pulled through thanks to something going all the way back to when Ippo first started boxing, teaching Ippo how to use his toes to step in. Takamura ended up using the same trick himself to win. The boys celebrated Takamura's win with a parade, which nobody cared about. To get some attention, Aoki pulled out the Brockelman suit, and to everyone's shock, it actually worked. Takamura, jealous of Aoki's unexpected success, kicked him out of the moving car. Ippo, who was driving, then completely abandoned the car to help Aoki, which resulted in the car crashing. Meanwhile, Miyata had another title defense. Sando wanted to watch it to confirm something, so he and Ippo attended. Miyata easily won, and afterwards Sando confronted him backstage. Sando told him to move on from Ippo, saying it wouldn't be worth his time anymore. He also revealed his own goal, to go to Mexico and challenge Alfredo Gonzalez and Ricardo Martinez. Outside the venue, Ippo ran into Sando's old teacher and they all met up. Sando had a request for his teacher, but first he wanted Ippo to punch him. Ippo obliged, and after feeling the punch, Sando turned to his teacher and told her to come live in his home. But don't get the wrong idea, you silly. He meant that while he was in Mexico, he needed someone to look after his granny. The next day, Ippo was weaving like usual during training, but instead of throwing a vertical punch, he accidentally threw an uppercut, which felt completely different. Back at the gym, he saw Fuji holding mitts for Aoki. Fuji then wanted to test how hard Ippo punched. When Ippo hit the mitts, he sent them flying. After looking at Ippo's fist, Fuji came to the conclusion Ippo had brick hands made to KO people, while Aoki's hands were built like tennis balls. Shinoda appeared and we got a flashback, Back when Fuji and Shinoda qualified as pros, Fuji lost to Shinoda and told him to carry the torch for his career. But the funny thing is that Shinoda lost his pro debut and retired, because his fists were also built like tennis balls. Later, Ippo attempted his new horizontal uppercut Dempsey roll combo and nearly tore up his leg muscles. He decided to max out his leg training before attempting it again. Ippo wanted to try the new Dempsey roll on a spar against Aoki, but he got dropped immediately. Back at the gym, Ippo was sparring with another boxer. He wanted to unleash the newest version of the Dempsey roll again, but this time the Dempsey looked and felt entirely different. Ippo now leaned lower to hit uppercuts after horizontally moving in and was dominating until he lost his footing and hit the empty space. Everyone at the Kamogawa gym was shocked by this, but Kamogawa was anticipating Ippo to level up the Dempsey roll ever since Ippo's fight with Jimmy Sisfa, where Ippo used the Dempsey uppercut combo to finish off Jimmy. Ever since then, Kamogawa had planted the seeds for Ippo to evolve, and now Ippo was almost there to perfect the Dempsey roll without any setbacks. Yagi went on and said that this would be the key for Ippo to make an impactful comeback to boxing. Takamura, however, seemed cold and said that who gives a shiz about Ippo. Putting stocks on him will only lead to failure and more disappointment, so they should only focus on Takamura and Takamura alone, since he is the sole boxer that actually accomplishes something in the gym. If you're wondering why Takamura gives off this cold answer, it is because he believes that Ippo is not made to box on the world stage. He may have the skills and discipline of a high-ranked boxer, but Ippo lacks the hunger, mindset and will to become a world champion, since the world stage is where real monsters reside and lose part of their humanity. Kamogawa approached Ippo and said to him that he can evolve the Dempsey roll even further. Instead of weaving horizontally or throwing punches vertically, Ippo should weave in and throw punches diagonally. By this, Ippo eliminates the cost of finding his footing for an uppercut where he just shifts his weight and then throws punches vertically or gets into the position for a gazelle punch. To learn this diagonal Dempsey roll, Ippo had to train even further on his lower body, his physical strength and his balance. To do so, Kamogawa helped Ippo in his training, and Ippo even wore the weighted wristbands Sano used in his preparation for his fight against Ippo. Ippo wore these bands 24/7 to constantly train. Slowly but surely, Ippo got the feel for the Dempsey, and with Kamogawa's help, Ippo would have a deadly finisher to take down his opponents. Ippo met up with Takamura and they had a talk where Takamura asked Ippo if he could actually deliver in his comeback fight and if he is willing to carry the weight of moving forward. Ippo gave a very Ippo-like answer that Takamura expected, and they both moved on. Ippo wanted to try the newest Dempsey roll on a world-ranked bantamweight who had a world title fight coming up, but unexpectedly, Ippo went down after receiving just a few jabs. Kamogawa immediately cut off the spar and ordered Ippo to leave for the day. On his way to his office, Takamura wanted to ensure Kamogawa understood what just happened to Ippo. Despite this, Takamura bluntly stated that Ippo might be broken, meaning punch drunk, or in normal terms, have brain damage. That day, Ippo reflected on his growth and how he wanted to show everyone the new Dempsey roll, but he also realized something was wrong with his body, even though he didn't want to accept it. Ippo was then invited back to the gym, where his only task was to draw a straight line. Ippo, too nervous, couldn't do it. Kamogawa then ordered Ippo to leave the gym for an entire month and not train. Though Ippo didn't come to the gym, he secretly continued to train to avoid losing any momentum on his growth. 1 month has passed and Ippo returned to the gym better than ever. He underwent several tests to determine if he was healthy enough to compete again. First, Ippo had to draw a straight line, then walk along without faltering, and finally he had to mid-train with Kamogawa. Ippo passed all tests and was officially accepted back to the gym. Just in time, another one of Takamura's title defenses was scheduled, with Ippo set to fight on the same event. Takamura, frustrated about having to defend his title again despite wanting to move up to the next weight division, was confronted by Ippo, who asked if he ever felt lonely dedicating his entire life to boxing. Takamura responded with insight into the life of a world champion, explaining that everyone starts at the bottom as a nobody and must climb their way up by eliminating the competition to stand alone at the top. He added that this isn't a pathetic form of loneliness but an extraordinary feat, striving higher than the rest and continuing to move up. Ippo's comeback fight was set. At first, no mid-ranked world boxer wanted to face him, except for the new Philippine featherweight champion who had recently defeated Malcolm Ghetto. Antonio Guevara, a southpaw, presented a style that Ippo wasn't prepared to fight against. Still, Ippo promised to give his best. Miyata, Mashiba and Sando attended Ippo's comeback fight, eager to witness the rumored new Dempsey role and see if Guevara would be his first victim. As soon as the match began, Ippo, determined to showcase his evolution, wasted no time and charged in. Caught off guard, Guevara was hit with a devastating punch that set him into the ropes before he fell face first to the mat within the opening seconds. Not letting up, Ippo charged at Guevara again, positioning himself to unleash the diagonal Dempsey roll. He threw a left uppercut followed by a left hook from the unconventional angles, then transitioned into a right uppercut and a right hook. However, Guevara slipped and fell to the mat again, which the referee ruled as a slip. Not letting go of his momentum, Ippo bulldozed forwards, but Guevara clung to him in a desperate attempt to stall time by throwing both of them to the mat. However, Ippo's brick house-like build made it impossible to budge him. Taking advantage of the situation, Ippo delivered a brutal short-range liver blows to Guevara. At the end of the round, Ippo had an inner monologue expressing his gratitude to coach Kamugawa and evolving to showcase the full potential of the diagonal Dempsey roll in this fight. In the following round, Guevara started adapting to Ippo's rhythm and landed some solid jabs. Still, when Ippo got too close, Guevara shoved him away out of fear. Frustrated, Ippo regrouped and pressed forward, initiating the Dempsey momentum. He threw punches that Guevara managed to block before missing several strikes due to Guevara's southpaw stance, which disrupted Ippo's approach. Guevara capitalized by jabbing Ippo away. Refusing to lose his chance, Ippo mixed in jabs and feints to break through Guevara's defense. Gathering the full strength, he aimed to finish Guevara. Ippo prepared to follow up with a diagonal Dempsey roll, but then realized that Guevara was already down to the mat. In the next round, Ippo promised himself he would deliver a knockout to Guevara and finish the fight. However, Guevara managed to land decent combos, and during an exchange, Ippo accidentally crossed legs with Guevara and slipped. Trying to close in again, Ippo slipped a second time, and this time it was ruled as a down. Doubt started creeping into Ippo's mind, and he questioned what was happening to his body. Desperation took over as he threw punches that failed to connect and was caught by a sharp counter. The round ended with Kamugawa scolding Ippo for his terrible performance. Determined to push forward, Ippo went back into the fight. He realized that Guevara was aiming for counters, but when he tried to dodge it, he failed and went crashing headfirst into the mat and went unconscious. It became alarmingly clear that something was wrong. Ippo was making basic mistakes and could have easily won the fight if he had been in his usual form. Kamugawa then began to piecing it together. Flashes of Ippo's struggles after the Gonzalez fight, memories of Nekuta's punch-drunk condition, and Wally's trainer warning about heading for disaster. The final realization came when Ippo attempted the Dempsey roll again, but suddenly lost all his power and collapsed. At the moment, Kamugawa understood that Ippo's body had broken down. Despite this, Ippo got back up and continued. Summoning his remaining strength, Ippo landed a devastating one-shot counter on Guevara, sending him to the mat unconscious. With the fight nearing its climax, both men were on their last legs. Ippo unleashed the brutal combos on Guevara, managing to knock him down again. Now it was all or nothing. If either fighter went down this round, the match would be decided. Before going for the finishing blow, Ippo glanced at Kamugawa one last time. In his inner monologue, he apologized. He had known something was wrong with his body ever since his Gonzalez fight. Still, he gave everything he had to master the diagonal Dempsey roll for this final bout to show his gratitude to Kamugawa. Together, they had created this killer move, and Ippo wanted to end his career by showcasing it. Guevara, refusing to lose, prepared for an counter. Unfortunately for Ippo, Guevara was faster and landed the decisive blow first. Dramatically, Ippo fell to the mat and the fight was over. This marked the end of Ippo's boxing career as he officially retired from the sport. Takamura watched every second of the fight and made sure to remind himself that he shouldn't get attached to Ippo and should only focus on himself. His title defense was coming up and he ended the fight with just a single punch. Then this effing guy just had to trash talk Ippo about retiring and got nuclear heat from the crowd for it. Then he just kicked Aoki on the street to stop a taxi, then he just dipped. Kamugawa decided to bring Ippo home after his last fight and they had an emotional final talk. Kamugawa congratulated Ippo on his final fight and asked about his favorite matches. Ippo answered that his fights with Tate, Gonzalez and Guevara were his favorites, obviously matches that he lost. He also revealed that his favorite boxer is Takamura, among other things. You can stop and read for yourself to see who Ippo thinks are the strongest boxers, along with everything else he mentions. Kamugawa's final question was whether Ippo thought he made the right decision by starting boxing. Without hesitation, Ippo responded, "Of course I did." The coach left and before Ippo could go to bed, he let out his final frustration by punching the ground and formally announced to his mother that he was finally home. The next day, Kumi came to Ippo's room to console him about his loss, but seeing him in that damaged state got her all emotional, and she ended up sleeping next to him. Ippo woke up, his big mother became a hard mother, and everything just escalated. Ippo later went for a full body test to check if there was anything wrong with his brain. What he learned was that he was one step away from suffering real damage. He had accumulated enough damage to affect his balance and sense of range, but over time he could heal. Because CT is not a well-researched topic and symptoms could arise years later, Ippo ultimately decided to retire while he was still healthy. They also mentioned Dr. Kiniski. If you've read Ashton no Joe, you will know he's the same doctor who researched CTE in that series, meaning that yes, Ashton no Joe and Hajime no Ippo take place in the same universe. Ippo took his final farewell at the gym. Kamogawa deep down was grateful to Ippo. He was his last boxer and allowed him to dream just a little longer about capturing a world title with his teachings. Ippo said goodbye to the other boxers and told Takamura that he had gathered many treasures along the way. Then we got an extended montage of basically Ippo's entire career represented through the falling leaves. With that, Ippo turned his back and moved forward. And that basically marks the end of Hajime no Ippo, but not really. 2 months after Ippo's retirement, we see Imai having another title defense, which ends in just 1 round. When asked who he wants to fight next, he calls Ippo to return to boxing, even though the guy has been retired for a good amount of time. We then see what Ippo has been up to since retiring. He helps Umezawa with his manga, and surprisingly, Ippo can now draw way better than he could when he last helped Umezawa, back when he couldn't even draw a straight line. Umezawa then asks the question we are all thinking, why doesn't Ippo just return to boxing? Ippo gives a very Ippo-like answer, too much time has passed and he has already made up his mind. Ippo also spends more time working on his fishing boat business and regularly hangs out with Kumi. One day, Mari randomly catches Ippo and Kumi together and questions Ippo about Imai calling him out. However, Kumi immediately shuts Mari down, saying that Ippo should stay disassociated from boxing since he almost suffered permanent damage. Mari then asks Kumi why she cares so much about Ippo, to which Kumi responds that if something were to happen to him, she wouldn't have the strength to look after both him and Mashiba, who's also a troublesome boxer. After that, Mari leaves them alone and dips. Back at home, Ippo gets jump scared by Nanako. You remember Itadaki's sister, who asks him what he wants to do. Ippo says he would love to help people now, since everyone supported him in his boxing career, and now he wants to give back. However, he makes it clear that he is satisfied with boxing and has no intentions of returning. Kumi then has an inner villain monologue where she proudly supports Ippo for choosing this path and vows to eliminate anyone who tries to drag him back into the ring. Just then, an unannounced guest appears. It's Shinoda, and he wants Ippo to return to boxing. Kumi immediately loses it and calls Shinoda out for being a terrible person. Shinoda quickly apologizes for his wording and clarifies that he doesn't mean for Ippo to fight again. He just wants him to become a cornerman or a second. The reason Shinoda asks Ippo is because Coach Kamogawa has been hospitalized and is in a poor health. They've decided that Kamogawa being the cornerman for Itadaki, Kimura and Aoki's fights will drain too much of his energy, so from now on he'll only be the main second for Takamura's fights. Ippo promises to think about this decision and first talks to Kumi about it. He reassures her that he has no intention of returning to in-ring fighting, but he loves boxing so much that he never considered becoming a coach to see the sport from a new perspective. Kumi respects Ippo's decision but hopes he never uses his fist in the ring again. Then we get a montage of Ippo pulling out the weighted wristbands again and training just to put a chair into the ring. He reunites with the other Kamogawa boys after a long time and learns that he'll be the second of Kimura's fight. Kimura meanwhile is completely out of gas due to his weight management struggles. Ippo returns to the gym and after a quick shadow boxing session he reviews Kimura's opponent and starts making strategies on how Kimura can defeat him. The night of the fight has arrived and Ippo returns to the Koroken Hall. Before heading inside he runs into Takamura, who as always is just trash talking. Ippo was just scouting an empty arena before Kimura's fight when he randomly spotted Hayami among the boxers who were shadow boxing. Hayami greeted Ippo and wondered if Ippo had actually retired. After getting confirmation, he confidently told Ippo that he was still going strong and will definitely become a legend. Then Hayami's fight started, and at first he was dominating his opponent like it was just another day at the office. But then we learned that his opponent is unranked. On top of that, Hayami has 21 fights on his belt with 11 losses, most of them recent. Fubashi was also in the crowd and has been watching all of Hayami's fights ever since their junior featherweight title fight. Fubashi knew exactly what was wrong. Hayami has been suffering from a shattered glass jaw ever since his fight with Ippo. Ippo broke it into pieces, and since then, even the lightest touch to his chin sends him straight to the canvas. Hayami tried to finish his opponent with a special counter, but he was instantly knocked down with just a simple touch to his chin. He got back up trying to fight on, but doubt crept in. He questioned where everything went wrong with his career, became overwhelmed and ultimately lost the fight. Meanwhile, Ippo noticed the connections between himself and Hayami. He realized that Hayami's body is just broken down, much like his own was during his final fight where he couldn't withstand even the slightest punches. Kimura's fight was up next, and Ippo took off his weighted wristbands. He needed to go all out just to slide the chair into the ring for Kimura to sit on. After the first round ended, Ippo threw the chair with all his strength, except it didn't land in the ring. Instead, it flew straight into the audience. Trying to redeem himself, he hyper-focused and carefully slid it towards the ring, only for the chair to end up facing a completely unnatural direction. Meanwhile, Shinoda's bald spot got exposed and Kimura had enough, breaking into a diva fight with Shinoda. Annoyed, Shinoda fight back and the two agreed to not talk to each other for the rest of the fight. Now out of gas, Kimura needed advice, but when Ippo tried to help, he blanked. The break ended before he could say anything. When Kimura returned to the corner, Ippo told him it was okay to give up and mentioned that movie that he watched with Kumi. Kimura, desperate for any kind of distraction, asked which movie. Ippo of course couldn't remember. Determined to find out, Kimura pushed himself to survive another round, and Ippo urged him to last just one more round. Somehow Kimura did, looking as dry as a skeleton in the process. Finally, Ippo gave some real advice. Kimura should just extend his arm while his opponent was charging in. Mentally, Kimura had already given up and decided to follow Ippo's words just to see what would happen. To everyone's shock, his opponent ran straight into his fist, knocking himself out. Against all odds, Kimura had won the fight. After Kimura's fight, the boys went outside to the hall and found the frustrated Hayami. Hayami mentioned he will start from square one and make a comeback. Ippo pressed him, asking if this was really the right choice. That's when Hayami broke down, admitting he was supposed to be the protege destined for greatness, until Ippo snapped it all away. Ippo just gave Hayami a cold glare because he recognized the same delusion Hayami was trapped in, the same one Ippo himself struggled with when he couldn't accept the reality of his own career. Takamura then gave Hayami some encouraging words, saying this performance was fire, but he wasn't mentioning his fight, but rather the time the boys went to sing in the karaoke. It gave Hayami false hope, especially coming from a world champion. This is the last time we see Hayami. He just walks off into the dark city alone, his back turned, determined to fulfill his destiny. After some time, it was Aoki's and Itadaki's turn to fight. Aoki won via KO while Itadaki struggled, mostly thanks to Ippo's confusing way of giving advice. Despite this, Itadaki won by decision and then ran off crying like a little kid. Realizing he needed to think from the perspective of a total beginner to become a better coach, Ippo decided to search for new prospects for the gym. One day he stumbled upon a kid being bullied by some high schoolers and intervened, telling them to let the kid go. The bullies naturally wanted to square off with Ippo. Instead, Ippo did a full Dogeza bow, showing a completely non-violent approach to resolving the situation. Their leader, Teihei, found the whole thing so pathetic that he just told his crew to leave Ippo alone and walked off. Ippo then helped the kid Teru up and introduced him to the Kamogawa gym. To motivate him, he told Teru to draw Teihei's face and attach it to the punching bag, mirroring the way Takamura introduced Ippo to boxing in the first chapter after saving him from Umezawa. However, unlike Ippo, Teru wasn't cut out for boxing, so instead Ippo introduced him to Umezawa, suggesting he try manga instead. Meanwhile, Ippo watched Miyata's latest title defense and it was a disaster. Miyata was performing terribly. Imai, who was also watching, explained that as Miyata's sparring partner, he knew exactly why Miyata's performance had declined. Miyata was still forcing himself to cut down to featherweight, even though he was a natural lightweight. The only reason he kept doing it was the lingering hope of facing Ippo if he ever returned. But in exchange, he was also damaging his own body. Miyata got his arse kicked, but managed to scrape by with a decision win. On the bright side, he ended up adopting a small cat, which is nice. Sometime later, Taihei approached Ippo again. This time he had done his research and knew about Ippo's past as a boxer. He wanted personal training from Ippo. At first, Ippo refused, but then gave him a condition. If Taihei truly wanted him as a trainer, he had to go and apologize to Teru for his bullying. Later, Umezawa and Teru approached Ippo and confirmed that Taihei had actually apologized. Seeing this, Ippo met with Taihei again, but gave him another challenge. In just 3 days, he had to catch 10 falling leaves using only his jab. When the day of the test came, Taihei cheated. He blinded Ippo for a moment and pretended to catch falling leaves, when in reality, he was just holding onto them the entire time. Ippo, completely unaware of this trickery, accepted Taihei as his disciple. Later, Ippo went to the Kamogawa gym to borrow some mitts for trading. There, he reunited with Kamogawa after a long time. For all time's sake, Kamogawa offered to hold the mitts for Ippo, and Ippo accepted. At first, it seemed like a normal mid session, but as it went on, things escalated. Kamogawa was left in a shock. Ippo had somehow gotten even stronger, despite having supposedly retired. All he had done was heal, wear weight wristbands and study other boxers. Yet his punches had only become more terrifying. Ippo thanked Kamogawa for the mitts and promised that to return them. As Ippo trained with Taihei, the two had a conversation where Taihei revealed that he had an older brother who was also a boxer. However, his brother was also mocked, and Taihei was so ashamed that he cut ties with him. Ippo saw improvements in Taihei's technique, but warned him to never use boxing in a street fight. Breaking the rule would destroy Ippo's trust in him. The next day, during heavy rain, Teru rushed to Ippo in panic, screaming that Taihei had gotten into a fight with bullies from another school. Umezawa had tried to resolve the situation without getting Ippo involved, but they hadn't heard from him. Without hesitation, Ippo sprinted to the meeting point only to witness a horrible sight. Taihei was standing tall over a group of beaten bullies, having used Ippo's teachings to hurt others. Ippo tried to reason with him, urging him to stop and just come back to the gym for more mid-training. But Taihei, with an arrogant smirk, slapped the mitts away and mocked Ippo's naive nature. He sneered, saying that whoever taught him boxing must be a complete idiot for letting someone so soft into the sport. Ippo was devastated. His own disciple had betrayed everything he stood for, and at that moment, something inside him snapped. Ippo's face turned ice cold, giving what is easily the most chilling glare of the entire manga. Without hesitation, he slapped Taihei with all his might. This impact was so devastating that Taihei flipped through the air multiple times and was knocked out cold with a concussion. As Ippo came to his senses, he was in shock. He couldn't believe what he had just done. Guilt overwhelmed him. Thankfully, Umezawa stepped in like a true Chad. He told one of the remaining bullies to take Taihei to the hospital while he handled Ippo, but Ippo was still consumed by guilt. Feeling that he needed to atone, he marched to the police station to turn himself in. The officers, however, thought it was a joke and laughed him off. Still, Ippo was unable to shake his remorse. To show his regret, he completely shaved his head bald and went to the Kamogawa gym, requesting his permanent leave forever. Kamogawa, however, refused to let him off that easily. He told Ippo that his punishment should be way more harsher. Instead of leaving, he would have to train 2 new disciples until they made their pro debuts. And of course, those disciples were none other than Taihei and the other punk who witnessed the slap of the millennium. In a show of commitment, both Taihei and the punk shaved their heads as well. They told Ippo they forgave him on the condition that he trained them. With no other choice, Ippo accepted, and just like that, he had now had his own disciples. By the way, it turned out that Taihei's older brother was none other than Aoki. Naturally, Takamura found out about this and blamed Aoki for everything, punishing him with the infamous Finger of Doom. As for Kumi, when she saw Ippo's freshly shaved head, she accidentally gave it a clean kiss, and for some reason Ippo didn't even feel it. While doing some road work, Ippo and his disciples stopped at the iconic tree where Ippo first learned to box, and under the tree Miyata was waiting. Ippo said to him just to not hurt his body for him, since Ippo is retired and won't be back to boxing. Miyata then questioned him. He trains like a regular boxer but still limits himself by viewing himself as retired. Ippo said he was close to receiving brain damage, over which Miyata dropped a bomb and asked who implanted the thought of having such a thing. He left saying that he wouldn't be waiting for too long and would move on to his next journey. The disciples heard this and wanted to learn who caused Ippo to think he was injured and should never box again. Then they saw Kumi again, and she just straight up said that the disciples should not talk talk Ippo into returning to boxing since he has brain damage. So yeah, and these guys got the answer. Kumi was especially in a terrible mood for some reason, and the reason is because Mashiba has one less OPBF title defense against Iga. Coincidentally, Mashiba ran into Ippo and his group and asked if they all turned into mocks or something. Then Ippo watched Mashiba's fight against Iga, where Mashiba basically won in an almost zero damage run. After this fight, Ippo realized why he lost, which ultimately led to his retirement. He shared this reason with Coach Kamogawa in the gym, stating that he abandoned his jab. Since he required the Dempsey role, he abandoned the jab and only focused on dodging incoming punches to then land the finishing blows. Kamogawa agreed, stating that those who can control the left can control the world, and if Ippo had trained better, it could have been different. But worrying about that now is pointless since Ippo is retired, and there's no point of finding new strategies for himself since he won't fight ever again. Ippo got frustrated and wanted to punch his frustrations away, but ended up breaking down and fell to his knees. After Ippo had this breakdown over abandoning his jab completely in boxing, Takamura's last middleweight title defense was set. Ippo and his group finally grew some hair back and rocked that fade. They were also allowed to watch this fight from the corner, so the disciples could experience what a world title fight looks like from the best seat, and for Ippo to analyze Takamura's fight. On the night of Takamura's fight, something seemed off. For some reason, Takamura, who always goes for the KO whenever he can, was being driven back and getting beat up, unable to land a single punch. Ippo tried to understand why and came to the conclusion that Takamura's opponent was making small adjustments, whether by guarding himself differently or slightly changing his jabs to keep Takamura getting close. Kamogawa realized that Ippo was slowly grasping the situation, but Takamura shut him down, telling him to not think about Ippo since he would never come back to boxing. In the second round, Takamura still seemed to struggle, but at the decisive moment, he jabbed his opponent unconscious. Now that he could do whatever he wanted, he delivered the finishing combo. Then Takamura announced that he would relinquish the middleweight title to move up to the super middleweight division. And of course, he had to be a huge jerk to the crowd again, getting booed out of the building like always. After the fight, Kamogawa asked if Ippo had learned something, and Ippo realized the importance of the jab again. He told Kamogawa that he would never stop learning and just wanted to keep going. But at home, Ippo started experimenting with different jab variations and accidentally punched a hole in his wall. To cover that up, he slapped a clearly stating poster of Ricardo Martinez, the pound for pound strongest boxer, right over it. He admired Martinez especially for having the strongest jab out of every boxer. To make sure he wouldn't forget his thoughts, Ippo wrote everything down. He started analyzing the jabs of fighters like Mashiba and Miyata, both of whom used the jab at mid and long range, while Ippo's reach is too short. That's why he never relied on his jab and instead just waited for openings to charge in like a raging bull. And that's exactly why he took so much punishment. He even recalled his fight with Kojima, where his lack of jab was painfully obvious. He only won because of his sheer determination and rage to KO Kojima, rather than actually using his skill set to avoid brain damage. Ippo also analyzed how his opponents needed to throw jabs or punches at a slight angle to hit him. Then the thought hit him. What if he had realized this before retiring? Could he come back? He quickly brushed it off and kept writing down everything he did and didn't understand about boxing. And before he knew it, his iconic hairstyle had grown back, alongside with his disciples' hair. They were still training, and thanks to Takamura's fight, Ippo came up with a new training strategy, a numbering system. He would call out specific number combinations and the disciples had to execute them in order. The Kamogawa boys also wanted in, so Ippo let them join, but only made them spam the jab, which made them angry. To help demonstrate, Ippo started shadowboxing with an imaginary Sando, trying to refine the way he called out commands. But midway through the exercise, he completely changed up the strategy, which just got him even more shizzed on. Sando wanted to fight Alfredo Gonzalez, but since Alfredo's camp kept ignoring his challenge, he decided to head straight to Mexico with Hoshi. Sando later flew to Mexico to personally challenge Alfredo, but while searching for a bear to fight, he accidentally ran into a lion, and that lion was Ricardo Martinez. Sando asked for a spar, got rocked early, but still managed to score an off-screen down against Ricardo. After that, a fight was set where the winner would face Ricardo for the world title in the future. Ricardo also pointed out that Sando's only 2 losses came against Ippo, and Ippo himself came close to beating Alfredo. Even retired, Ricardo acknowledges that the boxing world still somehow revolves around Ippo. Back in Japan, Ippo was invited to a class reunion where he became the celebrity of the night and was even asked why he retired. He also ran into Aikawa again, you know, that girl from the class who was barely relevant to the plot. Ippo walked her home where she admitted that she had always kind of liked him and even gave him her number, which in true Ippo fashion he immediately lost. But the important thing was that after all these years, Ippo still felt like he hadn't changed one bit, despite his efforts to become stronger. Later, Ippo and his disciples were invited to Date's gym for a public rookie spar, where other characters like Kobashi, Okita and Oda also brought their students. Ippo expected his disciples to do well, but they got rocked hard and had a rough time recovering. Then, out of nowhere, the news broke. Sendo had knocked down Martinez. Everyone was shocked and now Sendo was officially set to fight Gonzalez. After the spar, as Ippo was leaving, Kobashi asked Date what brought him back to boxing. Date simply replied that it all came from his heart, that even after the fire had completely vanished, the embers were still there. Sendo eventually returned to Japan and made it clear that he only wanted to fight Alfredo because Alfredo had beaten Ippo. This was Sendo's way of challenging someone stronger than himself, since Ippo had beaten him twice. He even asked Ippo for advice on how to take down Alfredo. Ippo pointed out that their styles were actually similar, but Alfredo's jabs might be even stronger. Wanting to train, Ippo grabbed the mitts, only for Sendo to break a piece of Takamura's statue, but don't worry, that could be fixed later. During mitts training, Sendo nearly broke Ippo's nose and got curious about how Ippo would perform. Ippo obliged, taking off the weighted wristbands he had been wearing all the time. With a single jab, he sent the mitts flying out of Sendo's hands, and the impact ricocheted into Takamura's statue, completely destroying it. Sendo left after that, fully accepting that Ippo had become stronger than ever. Ippo was assisting Kimura with his training, but Kimura was struggling hard with his weight management. It got so bad that he passed out multiple times from exhaustion. When nothing else worked, Ippo took drastic measures. He shaved both himself and Kimura bald to help make the weight cut. With Kimura's condition in mind, Ippo came up with a strategy, finishing the fight with just one round to avoid draining Kimura's already limited stamina. When the fight began, Kimura's only goal was to push his opponent into the corner and spam the dragon fish blow, much like Ippo's Dempsey roll. Everything was going according to plan until the round ended, leaving Kimura looking as dry as a mummy. Desperate, Ippo tried reviving Kimura the same way Kamogawa did back in the day, by showing a bunch of ice into his shorts. Surprisingly, it actually worked. Ippo explained that Kimura just needed one good hit to finish things, but Kimura barely had any stamina left and started having an inner breakdown, thinking he was pathetic for not making any progress since his fight against Mashiba. In that moment, he pulled off a reverse dragonfish blow, securing a KO victory in the end. Next up was Itadaki, who won via a decision. Then it was Aoki's turn, where it was revealed that thanks to Takamura's finger of doom, he could no longer perform the frog punch. The boys started talking about how much Ippo has changed and wondered what it would happen if he returned to boxing, until Takamura shut them down, telling them to shut up because that wasn't happening. With Sendo's fight against Alfredo coming up soon, Kamogawa had a request for Ippo. He wanted him to go to Mexico to gain first-hand experience watching world-ranked fighters and champions in action, so he could become a better coach. Ippo accepted and flew to Mexico, where he met the Mara brothers on his way to see Sendo. On the day of the weigh-ins, Ippo was recognized by Alfredo and even Ricardo Martinez, metaphorically showcasing that even though Ippo is retired from boxing, the boxing world still revolves around him. Sendo needed to be in a certain mindset to fight a beast like Alfredo Gonzalez, so he implored Ippo to have a non-contact spar, meaning they would not touch each other and would stop their punches at the very last second. However, Sendo was getting too much into the spar and was literally trying to punch Ippo for real. Ippo avoided all the oncoming punches and even teased Sendo by sticking with the no-contact rule and stopping his punches before connecting with Sendo's body. This gave Sendo negative aura, and he threw smashes at Ippo that even connected with Ippo's headgear but still did not touch Ippo. This moment was enough for Sendo to get heated up for his match against Alfredo, as he witnessed that Ippo, even though retired, still had the skills to make a legitimate comeback to the ring and hopefully have a rematch with Sendo. Actually, Sendo's whole motive for challenging Gonzalez and later Ricardo Martinez was to get Ippo out of retirement. Sendo wanted Ippo to challenge him for the world title without having to slowly climb his way up through the rankings, going straight to the final fight. Ippo watched the fight where both men were throwing hands like wild cavemen. He also stepped in for Sando's corner to stop them from starting and let Sando keep fighting while he is still hot. Sando ended up winning the fight and retired Alfredo. Sando then fully embraced the Mexican people, and then the main event started. Ricardo Martinez's title defense against the former WBC featherweight champion Billy McCallum. Billy had relinquished his title just for the chance to face Ricardo for the WBA belt. Since the boxing sanctions don't allow Ricardo to unify titles, this was the only way Billy could challenge him. Otherwise, Ricardo will just hold all the belts indefinitely with no one having a chance to dethrone him until he voluntarily gave them up. Ricardo had high expectations of McCallum. After all, he was a world champion who utilized the Philly shell, a defensive stance that allows for both offense and counterattacks while maintaining their strong jab. The fight began, and while Ricardo was mildly impressed, Billy did zero damage. During an inner monologue, Ricardo reflected on his existence. He considered himself barely human, someone who took boxing too seriously, yet never had anyone push him to his limits. He felt isolated because no one could bring out the best in him. At one point, he even considered letting Billy land a hit just to feel something, but he immediately dismissed the idea as disrespectful to boxing itself. Instead, he just spammed his jab, breaking Billy's arm in the process. By the end of the fight, Ricardo was still unchallenged, desperately waiting for someone, anyone, to finally push him to his true limits. Ippo watched the fight and recalled Takamura's words about true monsters being extraordinary. Back in Japan, Kimura had a yee-yah haircut due to malnutrition, so he had to wear a wig. Meanwhile, Ippo returned home, bringing a bunch of Mexican masks with him. During training, Kimura's wig came off and Takamura told him to be clowned somewhere else so he can focus. It was then revealed that his fight with the Super Middleweight Championship was officially set against the reigning champion Keith Dragon. Dragon is an orthodox boxer and a hardcore mahjong player. His whole stick is that he's just insanely lucky, believing the goddess of fortune is always by his side. Takamura scoffed at this, saying luck alone isn't enough, and then asked the boys, who's not cut out to be a champion? Without hesitation, he pointed at Aoki. That serious, he explained that those who don't even dream of becoming a world champion will never be one. World champions can sense when someone's fists are full of dreams, and they can crush an opponent who lacks a goal without a problem. Luck is simply meaningless, though he did admit that fighting him in the ring is basically bad luck anyway. Ippo then had a discussion with Kamogawa, wondering why if Takamura was such a mega champion, they couldn't perform in the Tokyo Dome. They didn't have enough promo or money for it, but even just thinking about it put Kamogawa in a good mood. Ippo even admitted it would have been his dream to fight there, but since he retired, it wasn't possible. On his way home, he glanced over the monster line, remembering Kamogawa and Takamura's words, and reflected on the fact that he never truly aimed to become a world champion. Later, while training his disciples, Ippo ran into Takamura and wanted to learn more about what it really takes to become a world champion. Takamura, noticing Ippo staring at him too much, called him out, making Ippo flustered. Ippo then mentioned that Kamogawa's dream was to see one of his boxers fight in the Tokyo Dome. Takamura responded, it's possible. He then said that both of them, Kamogawa's last disciples, should aim for the Tokyo Dome together, even though Ippo was retired. The same day, Ippo had Takamura draw a fortune card at the shrine to check his luck, and as expected, Takamura pulled the worst possible luck. Since his next opponent was literally the luckiest man alive, Ippo panicked and tried to bless Takamura with every kind of good luck possible. He prayed, brought lucky items, and even slipped that be healed from Berserk if you can spot it. But luck alone wasn't going to predict the future. Then disaster struck. Takamura was involved in a car crash while saving a kid. Luckily, he front flipped over the car and avoided a serious injury, but his already messed up leg from the bison fight got even worse. Ippo patched him up with some good luck bandages and kept close watch on him. But then a falling vase was heading straight into Takamura's head. Ippo reacted fast, punched the vase away, and then got knocked out by Takamura's reflex punch. And just when things couldn't get worse, a typhoon hit. Ippo asked if Takamura should postpone the fight, but Takamura snapped, saying he was already in a rush and didn't have any time to waste. Then, the moment Dragon landed in Japan, the typhoon vanished. Dragon just smiled, saying the goddess of fortune was by his side. He then went to train at Miyata's gym, where something about his fighting style seemed off. Ippo and the boys prayed even harder, then Ippo watched Dragon's old fights, and something still seemed off. That's when Ippo learned Dragon came to Japan to play underground mahjong. Coincidentally, Miyagi was apparently the king of underground Mahjong. The same night he was playing against Dragon. Ippo needed a closer look at Dragon, so he analyzed his Mahjong playstyle. And don't worry guys, I'll spare you the 3-chapter Mahjong match, because let's be real, neither of us understand Mahjong. But from the way Dragon played, Ippo figured something out. Dragon's dominant arm was actually his left, meaning he was a southpaw in disguise. Determined to warn Takamura, Ippo rushed to the shrine only to be surprised to see Takamura already there. Ippo told him that Keith was a southpaw. Takamura simply smirked and said he already knew. He then said that there are some things in life you just can't control. After saying his prayer, Takamura accidentally pulled down the entire shrine rope. Before leaving, he turned to Ippo and asked, "Don't you want to try it again?" Ippo didn't understand what he meant. Takamura then walked off, saying he had to carry this weight alone then. The fight build-up continued with Takamura and Dragon facing off and promising a generational performance. But before the fight night, Takamura was found completely messed up, because he tried asking out Yamaguchi in a not so friendly way out. On the day of the fight, Ippo finally reunites with his former boyfriend. Miyata tells him that Dragon is a southpaw, but Ippo says he already figured that out beforehand and even told Takamura. Miyata then had an inner monologue, struggling to believe that someone retired like Ippo could notice that, and wondering what would happen if he ever returned to the ring. Takamura started off evenly matched and slowly began to dominate as he moved closer to his natural weight class. His injured eye and leg kicked in again, but in the end, Takamura still pulled through and became a 3-division world champion. Ippo helped escort him home, and before passing out, Takamura gave him some words of encouragement, reminding him that in life, everything you achieve is done by your own hands. And when they woke up, they were cutely cuddling with each other. Sometime later, Kumi came to Ippo with big news. Mashiba had secured a preliminary world title match against a former world champion. Ippo was unwillingly invited to Mashiba's pre-fight ceremony, where Mashiba made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with Ippo. Despite the tension, Ippo shared his research on Mashiba's opponent, Juan Garcia. He dumped a ton of information, but the important takeaway was that Garcia was an infighter with a weak lower body. Ippo suggested a strategy: play defensive in the first half, then go all in offensively in the second. However, Ippo completely ruined the mood by pointing out that losing a preliminary world title match had basically ended his career. This killed the vibe of the entire ceremony, and he got chewed out by everyone. Meanwhile, Imai had another title defense, this time against Hoshi with Sendo in Hoshi's corner. Imai was on a 4-fight, first round KO streak, so when the fight started he went straight for the kill. But Hoshi wasn't backing down. Both fighters went all out, turning the match into an absolute slugfest. It became a battle of endurance and stamina. Unfortunately for Hoshi, he was the first to break, allowing Imai to finish him off with a brutal KO combination. After the fight, Imai called out Sendo, demanding that he take their generation of fighters seriously. But since Sendo was busy preparing for Martinez, he just pointed at Ippo and told Imai to wait for him instead. Then shocking news broke. Martinez announced that he would not be fighting Sendo next. Instead, he had chosen to fight Wally, one of Ippo's former opponents. Wally had been making waves ever since his fight with Ippo, racking up 24 wins. Wally and his coach even flew to America to train, where they met with Volk and Daniki again. Since Volk was also scheduled to defend his title at the same event, the two trained together. The reason Martinez picked Wally over Sendo was because he wanted to get used to fighting someone wild before facing Sendo, and there was no one wilder in that division than Wally. Plus, the fact that Wally's only loss had come from Ippo further piqued Martinez's interest. Ricardo noted that despite Ippo's retirement, the boxing world still revolved around him. Mashiba's world title preliminary match was next, with Itadaki on the undercard, who won again via decision. Next was Mashiba's fight, which Ippo and Kumi watched, which also got Mashiba mad for him being too close to his sister. Mashiba first unconsciously, then fully consciously used every strategy Ippo explained to him during that exposition dump and managed to win his preliminary world title fight in a close battle. With this fight, he secured a one-way ticket to fight the lightweight world champion. Mashiba recognized that without Ippo's help, he would have been cooked, and even acknowledged that Ippo also had to endure all the pain in the ring to keep going, accepting him as somebody strong. Then he saw Ippo hugging it out with Kumi, which got him enraged, and he shouted a lot of bad words before passing out. The funny thing is, Ippo only understood that Kumi's Oni-chan finally won and that he would be a world champion soon, which obviously was not what he said. We then learned that Mashiba actually broke his jaw in that fight, injured and needed some time to recover before his big world title fight. Sando and his camp were preparing to see Wally vs Martinez in Mexico, so Sando invited Ippo to tag along and watch the fight live, which Ippo accepted. Ippo was insanely motivated, running past Takamura, who tried to scare him. Not one to back down, Takamura tried to outrun Ippo by shifting gears, only to realize that Ippo was keeping up, even while wearing the weighted wristbands, putting him at a disadvantage. They ran so far they completely lost track of where they were. At that point, Takamura, being Takamura, just grabbed the offerings to the gods and ate it, declaring himself a god in the process. Back at the gym, their competition continued. This time they held mitts for each other, seeing who could endure longer. Ippo's punches shook the entire gym, and his final punch was so powerful that it quite literally knocked the crap out of Takamura. Takamura just stared at his fists in silence, until he had to let it all out to relieve the pain. Ippo flew to Mexico, where the Mata brothers escorted Sando and Ippo to the gym, but then they ran over somebody on the way. Both Ippo and Sando thought they were cooked, but it turned out to be Wally, who dodged the incoming car. At the gym, Volk and the boys reunited, and Wally and Sando even had a spar, where Sando was not able to hit Wally at all. But then Ippo instructed Sando to hit Wally's lower body, which Sando obliged, but Wally then ran off, ultimately ending the spar. Volk also wanted a spar with Ippo since his opponent was also an infighter. Volk wanted Ippo without any handicaps, so Ippo took off the weighted wristbands to go full out in the spar. Ippo wanted to pay Volk back for assisting him back when he was in Japan, and helped Ippo with the Dempsey counter in the spar in preparation for Ippo's Japanese title defense against Sawamura. So in this spar, Ippo went all out the second the bell rang, catching Volk off guard. Volk had to cool Ippo off by attempting to hit him with the White Fang, but remember, this guy retired because of accumulated damage to the head, like what the hell, Volk? But Ippo had the retirement power boost and was able to catch Volk's White Fangs with ease. Ippo pushed even further, so Volk tried to hit Ippo with a powerful left straight. Ippo dodged that also and gave Volk a heavy left liver blow. Now enraged, Volk unleashed the Heian that he learned from Daniki and followed it with another White Fang to Ippo's head. Despite Ippo getting sluggish, he encouraged himself to be more helpful, deflecting Volk's jab and landing a right straight. Volk answered with an uppercut and then remembered that the guy he is fighting against has initially retired because he was close to getting punch drunk. Ippo lowered his body and unleashed the Gazelle punch, sending Volk flying into the corner. Ippo then took out the Dempsey rope for the first time since his retirement. Volk anticipated the counter but was surprised when Ippo went low to hit him with an uppercut, before Ippo could chop Volk's head off. Sando intervened and subsequently ended the spar, with everyone displeased with the outcome. Sando scolded Volk for hitting Ippo for real, considering the possibility that Ippo might be punch drunk and retired. Volk, despite being the world champion with newfound skills, acknowledged that Ippo nullified them and even sensed killing intent from him, questioning why a retired boxer like Ippo is upgrading himself if he is not returning to the ring. Daniki intervened to explain that there is something inside of Ippo that yearns to step back into the ring, but it requires a certain trigger to be activated, or else it will remain dormant forever. Martinez and Wally finally faced off, where Martinez confirmed the title wouldn't change, while Wally was just goofing around and taunting Martinez for being so serious. Miguel then revealed that Ippo would also be in Wally's corner as a second during the fight to gather more knowledge as a coach. Volk's title fight was first, where he wanted to end it as quickly as possible since Ippo broke Volk's ribs during the spar. He managed to end the fight in just one round, and with that, the fight is done, and Wally's match was next. Wally's ultimate goal is to become a champion to raise awareness about the mistreatment of animals and eventually become a zoologist, which is very wholesome of him. On the day of the fight, the headline for the match was the Alpha vs Omega, which is very characteristic of them. Wally, the Alpha, is a wild beast making his way to the top, wanting to overthrow the dominant Omega, who is lonely at the top and awaits the challenge he has longed for so long. When both of them finally got into the ring, Ricardo noticed Ippo in Wally's corner and questioned what his role was in the fight. His coach wanted him to not get flustered about this and just focus on the match. Ricardo accepted this and the fight was about to begin. Even though Ippo was the corner man, he had little involvement in Wally's fight. Wally was winning on points early until he gassed out and Ricardo finally started landing clean shots. Wally went all out until the very end, which forced Ricardo to briefly show his true colors to finish the fight. After this intense fight, Ippo returned to Japan, where he first met up with Kamogawa and expressed his experience in Mexico and how much more he loved boxing thanks to Martinez's performance. Kamogawa knew the fire was still burning hot in Ippo and went on to mid-train with him. Then Ippo met up with and his disciples and gave them masks again. Ippo's disciples expressed that they finally wanted to prove their worth and wanted to take the pro test, which Ippo was first against, but then accepted that they could have their test soon. Mashiba and Sando's world title fights were now closer than ever, which Takamura predicted that both of them would lose since they lacked certain specialities. Ippo was first glad that everyone was moving up in the world, but then he felt a sense of being left out. The boys were discussing the lightweight world champion Marcos Rosario when Ippo revealed that he has 20 wins, 2 losses and 2 draws, the same win-loss record as Mashiba. He is a southpaw infighter and his losses and no contests come from the fact that he is a notorious cheater during fights, earning him the nickname the bad boy from Puerto Rico. Then we get introduced to the bad boy himself, Marcos Swiss Cheese Rosario. The very first thing he did was almost shoot his manager, only for it to be revealed that he was actually trying to shoot at Mashiba's poster. Then he got up close and smacked that poster with his bare hands, promising to end Mashiba's happiness. That night, Ippo went to Kumi's house where she was alone since Mashiba was at the training camp. That was the perfect opportunity for Ippo and Kumi to finally smooch, but Ippo was interrupted several times. First by the shade of Mashiba, then by the boys, and then by Mashiba again, until Mashiba literally spawned inside the room since their training camp has been cancelled. Mashiba revealed how much he hates Ippo, but wanted to really know why Ippo wanted to date Kumi and wasn't making any progress at all. Mashiba said he wanted to entrust Kumi to somebody stronger than himself. He gave Ippo 10 seconds to name 5 things he liked about Kumi. Ippo had to go all out, even taking off his weighted wristbands just to say she's cute and stuff. But that wasn't enough for Mashiba. He wanted to see how well Ippo really knew her personally, until the whole thing then just escalated. Before Ippo left, Mashiba asked if he was really satisfied with retiring. Ippo said he was, but then Mashiba personally reminded him that his goal had always been to fight Miyata. That's when Ippo snapped. He called Mashiba out, saying that he had a chance to fight, but because Mashiba cheated, he robbed that opportunity away. In a twist, Mashiba actually apologized for it. He admitted he was just too desperate to win and felt guilty about it. He revealed that he only wanted to focus on his upcoming world title fight, so until then, Ippo should take care of Kumi until he becomes the world champion. Ippo accepted it, but then it was revealed that it was just a trick to make sure Ippo wouldn't see Mashiba at all. Sando was having a mental breakdown since his fight with Martinez was coming soon and he had no one to train with to test the strategy he cooked up to defeat Martinez, until Takamura randomly came to Osaka during one of his trips. Takamura agreed to spar with Sando and completely destroyed him. Sando insisted on the second round, which Takamura refused, so Sando just charged at Takamura, throwing a smash which was just a feint to block his vision, followed by another feint smash and then landing an actual smash that almost knocked out Takamura. It would have definitely sent somebody else to sleep if they were hit. Miyata watched the whole chaos unfold from the outside and saw the potential to help Sando prepare for his fight against Martinez by being a sparring partner until his actual match. Later, Kumi said she wanted to go out on a beach date with Ippo if Mashiba won his world title fight, something that an excited Ippo immediately accepted. Mashiba, alone at home, had a flashback of his life and recalled his wild, brawling days where he was controlled by pure anger. After his parents died, he had it way rougher, being a teenage older brother looking after himself and his younger sister. One day he got ambushed by at least 2,000 people, and when they threatened to hurt Kumi, he snapped and was arrested afterwards. His probation officer, who was extremely sick, introduced Mashiba to boxing, and he quickly got accustomed to it. However, he was still controlled by his demons while boxing, until he ultimately got defeated by Ippo. After his fight with Ippo, Mashiba lost his probation officer and felt isolated again, until the present day, where he now has the support of everyone he comes with contact with. So he promised to take the world champion. Meanwhile, his camp realized that they do not have a sufficient sparring partner since infighter southpaws like Rosario are rare to find in the boxing world. After reviewing the Rosario tapes, Ippo initially wanted to assist Mashiba in his training, but since he did not possess the southpaw stance, Takamura suggested Ippo could help Mashiba if he trained like a southpaw himself. So Ippo trained day in and day out for his stance and visited Mashiba's gym for a spar with him. Mashiba's trainer was initially against the idea of a retired featherweight boxer simulating a southpaw infighter. fighter. But then Ippo disrespected them by telling them he could unintentionally hurt Mashiba if he went full out. So to test if it's true, they put Ippo in the ring to beat him up for his snarky comments. At first, Ippo had difficulties getting inside Mashiba's reach. Then Itadaki intervened and mentioned that Ippo still wears the weighted wristbands and should take them off to weave in faster. What followed is that Ippo without any difficulties got into Mashiba's reach and started to dominate him to the point where Mashiba was pushed to the ropes and could only defend himself. This is a massive improvement ever since their first sparring session where Ippo sparred with Mashiba in preparation for his fight against Malcolm Ghetto, with both of them recklessly exchanging blows with one another. But ultimately Mashiba got the upper hand and Ippo lost the spar. But this time Mashiba's camp recognized Ippo's dangerous nature and decided to change their strategy to the one that they intended to use in the world title fight. And the strategy, Mashiba extended his stance, making it harder for infighters to reach him. They found themselves in equal footing and their initial spar ended with Mashiba's coach commenting that Ippo fights like a natural southpaw. However, Mashiba decided to continue the spar to further beat Ippo up, as he caught him and Kumi almost making out and sought payback. Ippo accepted Mashiba's invitation and they no longer sparred to train but to inflict serious damage to another, with Ippo abandoning his southpaw stance and Mashiba going all out. They continued like this for 6 rounds without any rest until a duel exchange occurred, resulting in Ippo going down. However, on the next page he quickly got back up and taught the other boxers how to spar with Mashiba in the future, again unintentionally disrespecting Mashiba for the second time. When Ippo and Itadaki were about to leave, Mashiba wanted to show his gratitude for their help, but hesitated at the last second. Just a few days before the fight, there was no information about Rosario at all. Everyone thought that he would simply not show up for the official fight. This got Ippo mad and even affected Mashiba, but he simply ran off all of his frustrations. Rosario finally showed up and Ippo supported Mashiba during that fight. Mashiba was actually close to winning until he caught Ippo and Kumi in 4K. He had an inner struggle, unable to believe his sister would settle for someone like Ippo after always telling her to find someone strong. But then Mashiba just smiled at them, almost pulled the win, but in the end lost the fight. This ending frustrated the fan base, including myself, since I reacted to it live when it dropped. And will he go down? Will Rosario go down? It did not connect! No way! Ippo was sitting next to Kumi throughout the fight and she was too shocked to respond to anything. Sano got rightfully upset that a dishonest boxer won and Mashiba lost, but Miyata just stared at the ring, keeping his eyes on Rosario. Before the fight even started, Miyata had analyzed Rosario to death, leading Sano to sarcastically ask why Miyata doesn't just fight him. Miyata remained silent. The stare down, if you want to call it that, is basically teasing that Miyata is going to move up 2 weight classes to challenge Marcos Rosario for the world title. Miyata has only one goal in mind, becoming a world champion to prove that his father's style of boxing works, and also fighting Ippo in the ring. But with Mashiba losing to a fraud world champion, it may have sparked a sense of justice inside of him, evident by the way he just looks at Rosario. Rosario even mentioned multiple times that he has to return to Japan to make up for his dishonest way of fighting and give his best, meaning he will be reintroduced stronger than ever to fight an upcoming challenger. Meanwhile, Mashiba was hospitalized without Ippo getting to see him, but Aoki leaked where Mashiba might be since his girlfriend Tomiko is also a nurse. When Ippo arrived at the hospital, he, alongside us, the readers, learned that Mashiba has injuries to his spine and brain and is in a coma, instantly making it the worst fate any boxer in the series has experienced, besides Anderson, who might have died thanks to Komogawa's Iron Fist, and maybe Wally since he's gone blind from his fight against Ricardo Martinez. But what Mashiba is currently going through is much worse. He's now fighting for his life to survive. Ippo wanted to be there for Kumi during this tragic moment, but Tomiko refused to let Ippo see her, since Kumi's only relative is now in this state because of boxing. Whenever she sees Ippo, she will see the personification of boxing itself, where Ippo's entire personality is him being all about boxing. That day when it was heavily raining, Ippo was having a deep conversation with Coach Kamogawa, where he admitted that he just wanted Mashiba to win no matter what, while Kumi was too concerned about her big brother's safety to think about anything else. Ippo was in a dilemma since he's both her second and coach himself. He doesn't know if he really wants the students to fight for their lives and push themselves beyond their limits to win a title. Kamogawa responds that as a coach, the top priority is making sure that their boxers return home safely after any fight. But at the same time, fighting beyond one's capacity is the ultimate goal for any boxer, and then to go even beyond that. So there's no definite answer to the question from anyone, and all they can do is now pray that Mashiba makes it out alive. This ties into what Takamura always says about losing your sanity to become a monster in the world of boxing. He believes that boxers like Ippo aren't cut out for the world stage because they lack the will to abandon everything to reach the top, including relationships that need to be severed and even their own health and well-being. Takamura is obviously a monster, going against all societal standards, cutting ties with his family and being completely fine with his friends leaving him. Kamugawa even admitted that Takamura would have become a world champion in any other gym, and that his own teachings had little effect on him. Walk is another boxer who had to abandon everything, his country, his friends, and even lost his mother, all to become a world champion. While Ippo and Kamugawa were having this deep talk, Sano was out on his road work. When he returned home, he was shocked to find his granny collapsed on the floor. Meanwhile, Miyata was informed that Martinez had picked him up as a sparring partner, alongside two other boxers he brought to Japan in preparation for his fight against Sando. Miyata called Ippo to ask if Sando was okay, since he had been dead quiet for a few days, unaware that Sando was in a hospital supporting his granny as she is fighting for her life. Miyata then talked with Ippo and mentioned that Martinez would be arriving soon for his title defense against Sando, so Miyata would have to spar with him. Ippo was surprised to hear that and wondered what Miyata's strategy would be, to which Miyata said that he will try to smash Ricardo to see if he could find an opening so Sando could use his anti-Martinez smash strategy he cooked up. Both had a great time talking to one another, but when it was time to hang up, Ippo quickly mentioned that he himself came up with a strategy against Ricardo Martinez. Miyata just hung up the phone and questioned why Ippo was still talking like he's an active boxer. Ippo even questioned himself as to why he thought about it and recalled the conversation he had with Tomiko, that he is just a personification of boxing. And when the rain stopped, Ricardo landed in Japan ready to spar. There was a massive storm, heavy rain, strong winds, the whole thing. But the moment Martinez arrived, the storm vanished. His coach even joked that it was because of Ricardo's presence since his nickname comes from the Aztec sun god. But Ricardo quickly shut it down, saying his only power is inside the ring, nothing else. Now here's where things get interesting. The last time Ricardo came to Japan to fight Eiji Date, he came alone. He just sparred with local boxers and Japan's champion at the time, Ippo. But this time, he brought 20 other boxers with him, including the Mexican featherweight champion Nargo Jose, the same guy Sano already defeated. That alone shows how seriously Ricardo is taking this fight. He knows how dangerous Sano is, and he's not taking any risks. Not only that, but Ricardo even requested to spar with Miyata, the OPBF champion. And to top it off, he delayed his world title fight just to prepare for Sando. That's why he fought Wally first, to test himself against a wild fighter like Wally before stepping into the ring with the wildest featherweight there is, Sando. While Ricardo was sailing into Japan, Ippo got another phone call, but this time it wasn't his boyfriend, it was his not girlfriend instead, Kumi. Kumi called to tell him that Mashiba can now open his eyes, meaning he escaped the possibility of, well, not being alive. This gave Ippo a huge sense of relief, and Kumi even asked if he could come see Mashiba. But Ippo has no common sense of a normal human and told her that he'll be leaving in 2 days for Osaka because Sano's title fight was coming up and he needed all the support he could get. Kumi just hung up the phone and started sobbing because, once again, Ippo completely lacks common sense to realize that she also needs support. And then Ippo kinda realized how stupid his answer was and proceeded to bang his head against the wall. Which, yeah, is relatable. I've done this many times myself after posting cringe artwork on my Instagram of my upcoming Hajime no Ippo fan comics. Then we get the moment that just feels different in the story. Ricardo Martinez is completely alone in Osaka, just appreciating the ancient buildings and surroundings while doing his road work, and for once he actually looks at ease. Normally, whenever we see Ricardo, he's always surrounded by other boxers, the press, or at the very least his coach. But seeing him alone for the first time, just in a good mood, is honestly refreshing. But he isn't alone for long. While passing somebody, he almost shizzed his pants and turned back to see Sando, also doing his road work. Sando was visibly bloodlusted, but he also could be in a grief right now. We unfortunately do not know what happened to his granny, but whatever happened affected him. Ricardo sensed the bloodlust and wanted Sando to stop and save the bloodlust for their fight. In an unintentionally funny moment, Sando says that he does not understand a single thing Ricardo says since he does not know any English or Spanish, but gives him a warning. The next time when I fight, Ricardo should be prepared prepared to give his life in the ring. So Martinez went straight to business and was extensively sparring with other boxers, specifically choosing Miyata as a sparring partner for 3 days straight, since Miyata is the strongest featherweight boxer besides Sando and out of Japan right now. Before the spar, Miyata wanted to test himself to see how strong he really is compared to Martinez, but also revealed to Ippo that he will try to use the same strategies Sando came up with to fight Martinez by incorporating some smashes that could actually connect. While Ippo also had one anti-Martinez strategy in mind, Miyata didn't listen to it before Ippo could even explain himself. Miyata's spar with Martinez first began with him just using his incredible speed to the limit, trying to find a perfect opening to land a punch on Martinez. However, Miyata got stopped quickly with his strategy and had to endure some incredible jabs from Martinez, which, if you remember, were even able to send Ippo unconscious during his spar with Martinez. Ricardo just saw through Miyata's speed and basically nullified his strategy until the first round of the spar ended. Miyata and Miyata Sr. noted that Martinez doesn't let go of his prey for even 1 second, not even during breaks, so just a little more. Rather than Martinez looking down on him, Miyata wanted to test his own boundaries to see how far he could push Martinez. But still, no matter what Miyata tried, he couldn't push through, to the point where he even started to wonder what must go inside the mind of a monster like Martinez. In a brief moment, we get a glimpse of Martinez's inner thoughts. There's a lot of text there, you can stop to read it yourself, but the 3 most important things are that he does want to fight Miyata in an actual match, kind of admitting that he is impressed, but he's also fully aware that he could end the spar at any moment. But lastly, and most importantly, he wonders what it truly means to be strong. That's the same question he asked his coach in a brief flashback during his fight against Wally, and the exact same reason why Ippo even started boxing. That one question connects Ippo and Martinez in a deeper way, showing that even though their paths are widely different, they still share the same core goal that ties them together. Miyata admits that by strategy alone, Martinez is just light years ahead of him and says that Martinez's mind for boxing is like a supercomputer that analyzes everything in an instant. Meanwhile, we cut to Sando, who is next to his granny in the hospital. Her condition isn't looking good, and if she does wake up, she only has a limited time left to live. Sando doesn't want his granny to pass without showing his gratitude by proving that she made him strong and that he can't take the belt off of Martinez. The day of the weigh-ins arrive and Ippo finally makes it to Osaka just in time to witness the moment. There he is, gooning over Miyata, who's got bruises all over his face and wears sunglasses indoors like a wannabe cool guy, and he only wants Ippo to shut up. Martinez is asked what he thinks of Japan, his opponent Sando, and how he sees the fight going down. In that moment, Ippo has a flashback when Martinez first came to Japan for his second fight against Date, where he openly declared he didn't expect anything from Date at all. But this time, instead of giving a cold dismissal, Martinez answers the question by turning to Sando and asking him if he can expect something. Sando doesn't say a word, he just mocks Martinez, and that silent intensity gives Martinez the confidence to say that it will be that kind of a match. After the weigh-in, Sando invites Ippo and Miyata to the gym to talk about Martinez and their strategies. But before they even get to Martinez, Sando first wants to know how Mashiba is doing, after Mashiba collapsed in his world title fight against Rosario. Ippo reveals that Mashiba had a craniotomy, meaning that part of his skull got removed to get a deeper look into his brain. The surgery was successful, but he still isn't able to talk and only occasionally opens his eyes, which pretty much confirms that his career as a boxer is over. Sando respected Mashiba, he understood that Mashiba was betting his life to win that world title and deeply respects that. Then Sando turned to Miyata, who had sparred with Martinez for 3 days straight, and wanted to know, based on Miyata's experience, if he stood any real chance against Martinez. Miyata took a moment and then answered, currently the only featherweight who could defeat Martinez is Sando. That got Sando excited at first, but then Miyata revealed that Sando only has a 1% chance of actually dethroning Martinez. That fired Sando up even more. To him, 1% is all he really needs. Fueled by that belief, he turned to Ippo and demanded a spar since he was too hyped to wait an entire day for his fight against Martinez. Ippo wasn't having it, so Miyata stepped in and said that a full spar would be reckless. They should fight just for 1 round only. And right when the spar began, Sando just wanted to smash Ippo, while Ippo was doing everything he could to avoid any punches. Ippo wasn't planning to throw any many punches, not wanted to risk hurting Sando before his biggest fight of his life. But Sando managed to land a hard punch on Ippo's defense and subsequently lifted him up. This is a strong contrast to their previous spars, where in the first spar, Ippo was completely dominated before fighting Alfredo Gonzalez and was left on the ropes looking almost unalive, and then later went on to lose to Alfredo. And in the second spar, Sando threw everything to hit Ippo. However, Ippo dodged every single punch in that spar and showed how much he had improved as a boxer, being able to defend and avoid punches. And after that spar, Sando was able to defeat Alfredo. But now, Sando could catch up with Ippo with his punches and began intimidating him. Ippo had an inner monologue where he called Sando an idiot for throwing non-stop punches at him while he didn't want to accidentally injure Sando before his fight against Martinez. At that moment, Ippo made the best decision he couldn't make and clung to Sando to stop him to prevent any harm. Sando wanted Ippo to let him go, but realized that it was extremely hard to move a giant rock like Ippo and had trouble with it. Ippo wasn't letting go of Sando and clung to the ground like roots growing out of him. Sando tried with all his strength to push Ippo away, but he just couldn't do it. He even realized that Ippo must be even stronger now than before his retirement. Ippo shouted at Miyata asking if 3 minutes had passed, which Miyata forgot about and then ended the spar. Then Sando suddenly had to leave, when neither Ippo nor Sando got injured and neither of them even landed a punch on one another during the spar. Miyata noted that in the sparring, Sando had revealed his anti-Martinez strategy. Data and Wally's strategies were to win through wild instinct or sheer willpower, but Sando's strategy is to land relentless, powerful punches on Martinez without ever taking a break. With every new challenger Martinez has faced, they've peeled back another layer of his true strength, and now it's Sando's turn to challenge someone supposedly unbeatable and defeat him once and for all. That speech turned Ippo back into a full-on gooner. Sando rushed to the hospital where his grandmother was in a critical condition. She had only one wish for her beloved Takeshi, to see some grandchildren. Sando almost wanted to hit her for saying that, but his grandma just pointed at his middle school teacher, which fueled Sando's will to punch her even further. Sando said that he already had a date with the world champion tomorrow and promised his grandma that he would steal the title from Martinez. Then we cut to Ricardo's camp. They were discussing whether Martinez really stood a chance against Sando. Naoko said that in terms of raw power, Sando was much stronger than Ricardo. They also talked about the time Sando sparred with Martinez when Ricardo was knocked down by accident. But Ricardo's coach corrected them, it wasn't an accident. Sando actually did knock Ricardo down. Ricardo had tried to step out of the way just in time, but Sando managed to barely clip him with his pinky finger no less, and he broke even that. The fact that Sando would go that far just to land a single touch intrigued Martinez. For the first time, he found an opponent not because of tactics or reputation, but because he was genuinely interested. For Ricardo, this fight was just fascinating. But for Sando, this was the moment he had waited for his whole life for. This is his chance to prove that he is the strongest man in the world, to prove his grandmother's life and the meaning of it, and to finally beat Martinez himself. Right now, Sando's fighting Ricardo, and with that, this marks the end of the video. If you want more videos like this, let me know, subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.